You are watching Sound County Talk. Watch, share, like, subscribe.
Of government is a very big achievement. It is the first time it has ever happened in the history of the Republic of Kenya. To get a president is not easy to come to your country. So that means President William Ruto is highly respected. Just like now, Right Honorable Raila Odinga and Dr. Kalonzo Musyoka has respected Konrad by coming to this meeting. So let's be proud of that. Sometimes when you go to African to meetings internationally, you hear they say, for that issue, speak to Senegal. On other issue, speak to. But on this one, it's the first time that we are seeing Africa speaking in one voice. It's an extremely important step, milestone. Remember, we have not had as many presidents coming to visit Kenya, as the way it has been done here. So we are making good progress. Anne Kanyi, really, you've asked a very good question. The best way to do so, to take advantage of AfCOFTA, Africa Free Continental Trade Area, is to be prepared ourselves. Because even if the continent was to be open for everyone, if you are not prepared, then somebody will have you, for dinner. So the issue is about industrialization, is about local production, is about even value addition of products from other countries. And I believe that incentive is very clear, and there are some very good concessions that have been made, even in terms of production of special economic zones. So yes, we cannot just be leading by opening up our borders, but we must also be the ones to actually develop these products, to sell. Let me give you statistics. Sometimes 2 or 3 years ago, we were getting about 199,000 containers in with products, largely from China. Only 10,000 were going back with goods. Now that's not good, because then what is the value of the SGR? We have to really produce ourselves. And it boils down to you having your small little industry and trying to find a market through the open African countries. Now, with Kista, this was not my question, but allow me to answer you. We must always be peddlers of hope. That is what Barack Hussein Obama said. Because if you try something once, and then you don't succeed, and then you throw your hands and move on, what will you have benefited from? Hope is what keeps us going. And for the youth of Kenya, that must always be the clarion call. For Mr. Mike Hisa, the only way we are going to industrialize is again through local production. And you can see there is a very clear attempt of having county-based products. Ghana is doing it, one industry per district. There are 50 of them. We hope and believe that we can pilot and do that. That's why you have the KIPES, Country Industrial Parks, and I think I saw my good friend P.S. Susan Mangeni. She can speak more about that. By the way, Susan and I were at some point the youngest ODM youth in the NEC under Right Honorable Raila Odinga. Yes, I was 24, she was 25. It's good to say that. So dreams are valid. Today she's a PS, today I'm government spokesperson. Yeah, it's good to say that. So the issues around also technology transfer, Mike. Remember today, Kenya is earning more from remittances than coffee or tea. So when you have many unskilled workers going out there, they are giving us money, and this government wants to raise that up to $1 billion, about $10 billion, about $1 trillion or so. And so that means we'll also have now skilled labor to bring about technology transfer. At some point, India did so. They had 20 million Indians in the diaspora. They were able to send not only money, but also they were able to give skills that were able to industrialize India. So we follow that. Dr. Elise, I agree with you. It's very important to benefit from the refugee human capital. And you can see a lot of Burundians actually doing vinyozis and that kind of work around. I can see a lot of them. So maybe that needs to be revised so that you don't have concentration camps that are not, that are just recipient I think because of this free idea of Africans moving is something that may need to be reviewed, and maybe you can help us in seeing how that can be processed. Then my friend George Kisaka, thank you. Mambo ni matatu. Mambo ni matatu. Na mambo ni matatu. Mambo ni matatu kupigana na ufisadi. It's basically about fighting corruption and cartelism, clientelism, and rent seeking, so that we emancipate ourselves from this scourge. If you look at South Africa, a great country, the one thing that has made that country not progress as it should is state capture. We still have that same problem here. Then the issue, Joseph Owino, I agree with you, my brother. You are the chairman of ANSAC, the Union of All Students with Disabilities in Universities and Colleges. Thank you for that. This $500 threshold is an East African customs regulations. And I have engaged Mr. Watanga of KRA. We have had conversations. That law is going to be reviewed because the standard is $10,000. I just came this morning. I didn't see that traffic. But of course, you'll increasingly see us speaking from the same point of view, because we must deliver as one. But for those who are harassed for this reason, we really want to give our apologies, because if you do so, then you dissuade Kenyans from, you dissuade tourists from coming to Kenya. Yeah, and then, yes, Ben Odhiambo, I think I've answered your question. The fallback position is to industrialize, to raise it from 7% of the current GDP to 20%, and that way then we will be able to do so. And let me tell you, because Ben Odhiambo, there is what we call the power of showing up. Waswahili wanasema mgaga na upwa hali wali mkavu. Hatuwezi tukatoka bure. We'll get something. Even as we are crafty, we know what we want. Nobody knows everything, but we'll get out with something the more we engage. So basically, Rose, our policy is economic diplomacy, and you'll increasingly see the president having professionals as diplomats, so that we can benefit from what each and every country where we have an embassy or a high commission or consulate can offer to Kenyans. So ladies and gentlemen, I would really want to finish by saying thank you very much. This has been a very engaging conversation. May we continue to be patriotic to our nation and country, because after all is said and done, we have only one country. The success of the future does not lie in the mere passing of time and change, but in the little dosages of change that we make today, here and now. Kenya is great. Kenya shall rise. Kenya shall win. I thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, sir, for your time. We've been having this conference since yesterday, Transforming a Nation Conference 2023, and how all citizens can really benefit from democracy and economic transformation. And at this session, I was engaging from the far end. I want to usher you out. At the far end, we've been speaking with Onchari Oyeyo, and he is the International Relations and Governance expert. We've also, next to him, spoke with Honorable Maina Karobia, Member of Parliament, East African Legislative Assembly, Yala. Government spokesperson was also here with us. And finally, Mr. Collins Odhiambo, Deputy CEO, Law Society of Kenya. Round of applause for our special panelists this afternoon. All right, and it's been an engaging two-day session. We've learned a lot this afternoon. We've learned that the government says that Kenya is not facing east or west. The government spokesperson saying that they are using the Tanga model internationally because it worked for them, while the experts feel that the flip-flopping is not good for this nation. So that's what we've been able to have. And without wasting so much time, we want now, and that actually brings us to the end of our panel discussions for this two-day conference that started yesterday and comes to a close today. So the next session is just a few speeches on what our leaders think about what can really be done to transform our nation through democracy and also economic transformation. And before I welcome Honorable Gitonga Mukunji, who is the Member of Parliament, Manyata constituency, it's my pleasure, before that, it's my pleasure to welcome PS Susan Mangeni. She's the Principal Secretary for MSMEs, to make her remarks on what she thinks can be done to transform the nations and have our citizens benefit from it. Welcome, ma'am.
Thank you so much. The former Prime Minister, Right Honorable Raila Amolo Odinga, the former Vice President, and my very good friend, His Excellency Honorable Kalonzo Musyoka, the organizers of this event, led by the foundation, the leaders who are here are members of the diplomatic corps, wananchi wazalendo. Good afternoon. God is good and all the time. Thank you. You see, the government spokesperson has already spoken on behalf of us all. And so not run into those moments where we contradict each other. I'll try as much as possible to be just very brief. I look at the program. I was supposed to have been here in the morning. I want to apologize. I think there was a breakdown in the communication, so I want to apologize. But I would really have loved to have been here during the panel discussion so that we engage more and I get to field some of questions. The government spokesperson, one thing that you did not say, it is true, but there's some statements which I cannot confirm, and neither can I deny. However, one particular commonality that I know around that time was that we were young in the ODM movement during that many years ago. I don't know how many they are now. But I can also confirm that there was an opportunity to nominate some young people, and I was ahead of you on the nomination list to Parliament. But I think Baba loved you most and preferred you, and that's how I missed being in Parliament. So you should have said that. So you must always thank Baba because he went ahead, for reason which I think he knew, but probably it was a better decision that he made. Because you can always wait and get an opportunity. So I just want to take very few minutes from my subsector, which is development, and just also offer some few insights on the theme. Transforming a nation. I just saw something there. Transforming a nation. For me, it's about transforming our pockets. I look at it from, we are not just transforming a nation. We are transforming our pockets. We want to see how we can put money in our pockets, because that's the most biting challenge that as a nation, as a continent, and probably as the world. For the first time, we are having renewed focus and attention on the MSME sector. Come to realize that the most biting challenge which we have, the challenge of young people, the unemployment of our young people, given that we are a young nation in terms of population, can only be solved. Enable that sector to grow, to expand, and to create jobs. I think that with a potential workforce of 20 million Kenyans, only 3.5 million are engaged formally, are in formal employment. Out of 3.5 million Kenyans, only less than 1 million, between 950 to 1 million there, are in civil service. 2.5 million are in private sector. To me, what does that means to us and to the government and to the people of Kenya is that we have no space left in the civil service to create formal jobs. The only space we have is in the private sector. How do we crowd in our population, especially at the bottom of the economic pyramid, into the MSME space and therefore expand the private sector to create for us those jobs that we are yearning for our young people? That's why I'm here funding PS for this subsector, the micro, small, and medium enterprise development. When you wake up in the morning, we have to bring all actors on board. And when we say all actors, I came in here when people talking about Tangatanga government. It's not a Tangatanga government, it's a Kenyan government. It's a Kenyan government that is promoting and championing interest of the Kenyan people, which bears on economic prosperity, economic development. So what are we doing in that space? For the first time since independence, we now have a home where we can coordinate the sector. And I must applaud the various players in the sector, development partners, private sector. There's quite a lot that has been happening. Unfortunately, all of us have been operating in silos. I know since independence, a lot of funding has gone to try and promote entrepreneurship, the culture of entrepreneurship among Kenyans. But the challenge is everybody does their own space, so we keep on duplicating efforts. And when you duplicate efforts, there's not so much results and impact that we can see. So we are there to coordinate that sector of MSME to make sure that we can leverage on all resources from all actors. And in these actors includes even those who are in opposition. Because I have never seen, and because I was in opposition one time, still our rallying call in opposition, in ODM, was how do we promote economic development among our people. So time has come where all leaders have to come on table, and I'm happy that this forum has also invited the chair, the co-chair of the dialogue which we are having. And I think as we invite them, what the Kenyan people, what I want as a key player, SME subsector, will want to see is to see to it that all our conversation are geared towards creating opportunities for our young people, for our women, and for the people of this country, who majority of them are at the bottom of the economic pyramid. There is my second point is that there is no corner of this country that has no economic value. There is absolutely no corner. And if you had any doubt, the most significant outcome of corona pandemic was that if you give individuals, even indigenous people, an opportunity to come up with solution, they will come up with solution. That's why if you look at Africa, some parts of Africa were not heavily affected or critically affected compared even to some modern and civilized societies, meaning there is something of great value that we have. So equally in this country, everywhere we go, be it in northeastern province, be it in Nyanza, be it in western, be it in coast, there is opportunity. So all we need to do as actors, all of us leaders, we need to come together and enable our people. We enable our people with the right decision making, power to make decision, power to choose their priorities. We enable our people with resources allocation. We enable our people by intentionally mobilizing and organizing them and directing them to where opportunities are, so that when they wake up in the morning, have something to put on the table. And to me, I think this should be our central focus of this great nation called Kenya. So that kind of dialogue is welcome, because until we empower people economically, we will have no people to talk about governance. You cannot talk about governance if your own stomach is not governed. Are we there? So finally, what opportunities do we have in a minute? Because it's critical. The opportunity we have is that we welcome all the stakeholders. And let me announce here that have said where my beneficiaries are in all political parties. In fact, all political parties bears the majority of my beneficiaries. Those young people who during campaigns are going to the streets, those are my customers. Those are the people that I want to come and sit down with ODM, sit down with UDA, sit down and see how we can now politically mobilize them and organize them economically. See how we can give them financing, see how we can direct them to where market is, so that at the end of the day, we start now being agents of economic development. The second bit you're doing is seeing how can we unlock access to financing. And I cannot finish without saying this, that the challenge that we have is that majority of our population were unbanked. If you are unbanked, it means you have no capacity even to walk to a bank, and it means you have no social capital that can go there and become your guarantor. We introduced Hustler Fund to help correct that market failure. And a lot of us in this room could be asking, tell us, yesterday His Excellency President Ruto announced that we had a borrower who has transacted 814 times to the cumulative tune of 4.5 million. It is true. It is true. And I can confirm it is true because I have numbers, I have statistics, and they don't lie. Why is this true? Let me give you this synopsis so that, and I will end after explaining that. When you took over, when His Excellency the President was being sworn in, we had narration of my example from Kikomba, who very early in the morning at 5 has to give her ID to some money dealer at Kikomba market. And every day that mama is given 1,000 in the morning at 5 a.m. And in the evening, that mama returns that 1,000 with an additional 100 shilling. So the interest rate there you can calculate. So every day this mama goes in the morning, takes Sukuma wiki, goes home, sells, in the evening returns with an additional 100 on top. You can imagine the kind of business which invest in 1,000 and you have to pay for credit 100 bob as interest. Which kind of markup are you taking home? It's no wonder we have so many of our women who cannot access such financing. So Hustler Funds comes in. This mama can now borrow 1,000 bob in the morning, goes and buys the Sukuma wiki, goes and sells, and has 14 days to repay at 8% interest rates. Those are the kind of people that we've been supporting. So this top borrower cumulatively owns a smaller shop, which is, like the Kadogo economy, says those blue band margarine of 5 bob, 10 bob. So when we started off, his limit was 3,000 bob. We enhanced one to 6,000 because he's a good borrower and repair. Every day he tells us he goes and borrow some items 6,000. He sells them. In the evening he repays. In the morning he does the same. In fact, he was telling us he has been using Hustler Fund money to bring in sugar. A sack of sugar, according to him, was costing 9,000. So every morning he borrows 6,000, he adds 3,000, 9,000 he brings in sugar because he's selling kadogo. By the end of the day, the following day, again he does the same and saves. So what I try to say, why are we doing this? And this is very important. Because now that borrower who has 4.5 million has now acquired a credible credit rating, which in the near future can walk to a bank right now and will not be asked about title book, will not be asked about logbook. On account of that credit rating, will be given the credit or the loan which he wants. So we've been able to give people collateral which they could not access. That's the major goal of Hustler Fund, because it's giving you collateral. away from the conventional collateral. So the population which didn't have, just grow your credit score by borrowing 500 shillings. If you can be trusted by 500 shillings, you can equally be trusted by 1 million shillings, and so on and so forth. So it's not something that you want to really say is not happening. It is happening. It has happened. And for majority of us in this room who do not have means, who do not have property, I will tell you, we are giving an opportunity to start growing your collateral system in terms of credit rating to access you to credit in the market.
Thank you so much. Because of time.
You want to finalize for me?
Because of time.
Okay, give me a minute, I finalize. Thank you. So, allow me to, or do you finalize for me? Thank you. Give me a minute, I finalize. I just say, isn't it? Thank you. I say, give me a minute, I finalize, isn't it? But if you can finalize for me, so there's no problem.
Give another time to finalize.
No, I'm just finalizing. So, the organizers of this event, all I was finalizing, and it's just good manners that we finalize, right? Was to say, in such kind of a forum, when we discuss about governance, let's centralize the economic development agenda aspect, willing to work together. My department, our ministry is open to bring on board all actors that interact with the population of Kenya. Thank you so much. And on behalf of the president and the executive arm, I cannot leave here before bringing his compliments, because he's our team leader in the executive and is going to work with you. We are open. We work for the private sector. We work for the Kenyan people. And I'm sure where we are headed, it's very bright. And Kenya will overcome all this challenge. Thank you so much, and God bless you.
Another round of applause for the PS MSMEs. Susan Mangeni talking about the contribution of MSMEs to the economic transformation. She has a lot to say, and we'll have to provide another platform to do so. But thank you so much for your time. We almost cut our program this afternoon. This other session is going to be very, very quick because we have some closing remarks from His Excellency Stephen Kalonzo Musyoka, former Vice President, as well as former Prime Minister Honorable Raila Odinga. But before they make their speeches, this session is going to be moderated by Honorable Gitonga Mukunji, who is the Chair, Young Parliamentarians Association, and is also the Member of Parliament, Manyata constituency. Please be fast on this one. Thank you.
Thank you very much, moderator. I was telling Baba that she has brought up very strong women. You can see PS Mangeni could not even blink when she wanted to finish her speech. Well, Honorable Raila Amolo Odinga, Baba, aka Baba, the Honorable Kalonzo Musyoka, former Vice President, and the convener of this great event, Director Konrad, members of the diplomatic corps, members of Parliament who are here, all protocols observed, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Good afternoon. I will be very, very, very strict with time because I can see we are not doing well. But first, let me introduce myself. Again, my name is Gitonga Mukunji. People say AKA form ni kujituma because najitumanga sana. I am the Member of Parliament of a place called Manyata in Embu County. It is supposed to be Manhattan, but but we cannot pronounce Manhattan, so we say Manyata. And I'm also the chair Kenya Young Parliamentarians, which is basically parliamentarians that are young, below the age of 40 years old. We are close to 71 members in that age bracket. So I am very proud to be their chair. I'm also very proud of this session, and I will go directly to the panelists or the speech. The people will make the speech. I don't know whether to call them here or to give them the podium. I need to be guided there. The podium? Yeah? Okay, thank you. So in that case, I will start with, what is this? I will start with my good friend, nominated MP, Honorable Irene Mayaka, who is also my Secretary General in Kenya Young Parliamentarian. Please welcome Mayaka with a round of applause. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Chair. Allow me to ride on the protocols already observed because of time, but also acknowledge the presence of my political leadership, led by His Excellency, the Right Honorable Raila Omolo Odinga. I call him the second Prime Minister of Kenya. To also His Excellency Kalonzo Musyoka, both of them being my political party leadership, to the leadership of KAS, I don't want to say the full names because I don't know Germany, led by Dr. Annette, of course, distinguished guests, good afternoon. As has been Irene Mayaka, I am nominated in the Parliament of Kenya to represent workers by the Orange Democratic Movement Party. And I'm just here to briefly just speak about transformation in the youth leadership. And I'll just begin by saying that, number one, for us who are young in leadership, and of course we are not the first ones in Kenya, but the number one thing that we always believe in is that for you to even be able to have any level of success, you must have a mentor. Every time I have an opportunity to speak before my mentor, my political father, the Right Honorable Raila Odinga, it's a big pleasure. And I'll just briefly tell you one thing that he taught me once when I was in the county assembly, because I was nominated in the county assembly, but didn't have an opportunity to serve until the last 2 years. Why? Because of an election petition that went on and on. But I remember going to see him one day in the office just after the handshake. And I said to him, Baba, now that you and Uhuru are brothers, how about you speak to him so that this issue can be fast-tracked? And he said to me, and I remember very well, that he doesn't want that to happen, that he wants me to go through that process, because by the time I'm done with it, it will put me at a better place as a political leader than I am right now, and make me a better person. So I went through it, given his advice, and now I am in Parliament. And for that, I always say, always have a mentor that will tell you that it can't be easy. Don't assume that things should be easy, things should be given to you on a silver platter for them. And when that is done for you as young leaders, the next step for us is also that we must always push back the ladder to other leaders as well. And because of that, we went ahead, formed an organization of young women, because there's one thing about being a young leader, but there's also another thing about being a young woman leader in politics in this country. But the other day we noticed that it's also not easy being just a woman in politics, as the case of Kawera was. Yeah. So the experience and the tribulations that you have to go through are twice as hard. The other thing I wanted to talk about is that politics is also like a career. So you have to take it seriously. When you're in any leadership space, it doesn't have to be within the county assembly space or the National Assembly space, but any other leadership space, you have to take it seriously. Because politics is a career. You have to get out there, get knowledgeable, hold the hands of other leaders as well, and ensure that you learn how to make your job better. The other thing also that I want to talk about is that we are the voice of the youth in the spaces that we are. When we are in legislation, just listening to PS talking about the young hustler who has been getting loans and getting to the next level. But the plans I have is that we're actually reinventing a wheel that was already working. Because yes, there's a hustler fund, but we also had the Youth Empowerment Development Fund that was working quite perfectly. And that young people didn't need to go to the bank, because why should I get the hustler fund and then the next level I still have to go to the bank? The reason why the Youth Development Fund was created is so that these young people don't have to go that direction, that they can actually get these funds, pay back, and continue in their growth path. And my challenge to PS and his and the space she is in is that they need to go back and have a look at that, because it works very well. Why should the people who were already at a level of getting up to 2 million be told to start afresh, to start getting 500 shillings? It doesn't make sense. It means you're retrogressing backwards. Yeah, we are in a space in this country where being young has become expensive. Yeah, and as I just conclude, and we need to be the voice of these young people. When we are told that now you cannot get an ID with 200 shillings, that you have to cough 1,000 shilling, the young people back in Nyamira cannot afford the 1,000 shilling. And it's up to myself, Mukunji, and the other young leaders to raise these issues, voice of the young people in this country, and to continue engaging and telling the government when it's wrong, and also to tell the government when it's doing things in the right way, okay, so that we can continuously grow the spaces of young people. And as I conclude, because I'm seeing so many young people in this space as well, challenge us and challenge yourselves. If you want to get into that political space, hold the hand of someone who is there, and we'll hold your hands as well, so that we continuously work together. And also, finally, do not be afraid, because you're the voice of the people, and do not allow anyone to tell you that you're the leaders of tomorrow. We start now. Even Akina Baba, Akina His Excellency Kalonzo began when they were young people. So nobody should stop you. We also encourage our older generation, our leaders who are older than us, other organizations like the KAS, that let us collaborate together, hold hands together, so that we can be able to invest properly in the young people of this nation. I thank you.
Maybe you can give her a better clap, please. We have to support our women in leadership. All right, I'm told this podium should go up. Can I help? Okay. Yeah, this is better. I can see all of you now. Now, I want to call Honorable Alex Matere, who is a youth policy expert. Please, you can do a minute and a half, so that Baba cannot, we cannot delay Baba for other things. Thank you. Clap for him, please, as he comes to address.
Thank you so much, Mukunji. Allow me to stand on the already established protocol, but with special mention to His Excellency Kalonzo Musyoka, who gave me an opportunity to serve in his office as an intern immediately after I finished my university education. The theme for this conference is transforming a nation. But when I was given the theme by my friend Nathaniel Akadima, I decided to tweak a bit. And I talked about Kenya in the 21st reality. And the reality of Kenya in the 21st century, rather, is that I am or in Mukuru, or in Seikuru, or in Cherengani, where I come from, is more likely to sleep hungry than a young person did in 1963. That a young person in 2023 in Kenya is more likely to miss having an identification card than a young person did in 1963. That is the reality of the country that we are living today. Secondly, is that we have a youth bulge. And thank you so much, the PS for MSMEs, for touching on it. The projection is that by 2050, the population of this country is going to be about 92 million. Currently, the youth unemployment rate stands at 35%. Kenyan youth unemployment rate is more than that one of Uganda, Tanzania, and Rwanda combined. That is the reality. To worsen it is that now we have high cost of living. So we have youth that do not have a skill or a training in anything, or those ones who even don't have access to any form of employment or any form of income generation. And we expect them to get an education, to get a skill, to get a training, and also provide for their young families. That is the reality that we are living in today. Third is that every generation is called to stand up for something that matters during their lifetime. For Tom Mboya, Masinde Muliro, Pio Gamapinto was the freedom and liberation of this country. For Raila Odinga, in absentia, with due respect, Gitobu Imanyara, Mukisa Kitui, it was for safeguarding our democracy and multipartyism in this country. For our generation, as the young people, it's about the emancipation of the young people from the shackles of desperation, destitution, and hopelessness. Standing here, I am hopeful that firm and ensure that that is done, and that the future generation have a better future than the present that we are currently having. Lastly, because I'm also cognizant of the law of diminishing returns, I'm a great football fan, and Barcelona have a motto, a rallying call, and they say, we are not just a team of great stars, that we are more than a stadium full of dreams, that we are more than the goals that we score, and that we are more than the trophies that we have won. Thank you so much.
That was a wonderful speech by one Honorable Alex Matere. I now want to call upon Honorable Frederick Okango. He is a spokesperson Azimio One Kenya Coalition. Welcome, my brother, Honorable Okango.
Thank you so much. His Excellency Dr. Stephen Kalonzo Musyoka, who is the Wiper Party leader and our principal in the Azimio Coalition Party. Of course, Raila Amolo Odinga, who is outside briefly. First of all, I'm very happy and delighted the inaugural conference of Transforming a Nation. I'll be here for less than my good friend, but I'll only say 5 things. The first one, you cannot transform a nation like Kenya if you don't adopt of your smallest units of administration as the primary and basic unit of accelerated transformation. This government today has ignored the smallest unit, where majority of the young people are, where the majority of the young leaders are, and they are not doing anything about it. We have been told of stories of Hustler Fund, but we have not seen transformation from billions that we're being told that has been expended on the Hustler Fund. Secondly, I strongly believe that for you to transform a nation, you must engage the young people, their leaders, and the old as well. Because statistics shows us that in this country today, majority of the people are the young people. If I look at this room, I can tell you majority are equally young. And therefore, if these people are not involved in the planning, budgeting, and implementation of this transformative agenda, then you are not going to transform a nation. Number 3, I am very privileged, and I've been given opportunity by those. They did everything possible to transform this country in their own right. Baba Raila Amolo Odinga, when he was young, he managed and tried in the transformation of the multi-party democracy. When we were just having lunch down there, he was giving us a story of the Young Turks of the 1990s. If you read the history of His Excellency Kalonzo Musyoka, when he joined politics, I think he was less than 25 years that time. He rose, become a member of parliament, become a minister, become a vice president, and I think those are living testimonies for us young people that we can take. And finally, this country, interesting country, while the people who are our friends live in it and enjoy it, the very people who are the natives today as we speak are wishing that in fact maybe they were not natives of this country. Why? Because the people that are in office today told us that when they were going for a transformative agenda in the election, they told us they're going first to transform the lives of the young people. They brought them together and said that if they manage to get into that office, the first thing they'll do that they create employment for these young people. And I speak for majority of the young people, and particularly those who have an opportunity to be in positions of leadership, like myself. We say that going forward, even as we talk about transformative agenda for our country, be involved. We must be engaged. And lastly, we must be part and parcel of the transformative agenda, whether outside or inside a government. Thank you.
Maybe you can give him another round of applause. Thank you very much, my colleagues, and I will also not take a lot of time. I first want to say what Kenya Young Parliamentarians Association is, because it's very important for this topic of transforming a nation. And Kenya Young Parliamentarian Association, KYPA, is a bipartisan organization made of members of parliament, both in the National Assembly and also in the Senate. And key word there is bipartisan, meaning we have members from both the ruling coalition and opposition. I want to say that being a young leader is something that is a noble duty. And there is one thing that cuts across the young leadership in any part of this world, that we can make mistakes, we can try things, we can learn and unlearn things as we move on, as we are getting prepared to even bigger opportunities of leadership. And I believe one of the call I've always told the young members is that you don't have to comply with your seniors. I am in the government side, but whenever there's an issue, I have to stand out and say what is in my mind. That is very important. When the opposition also have a problem that we as young leaders are not complying with, it is always important for the young leaders in these associations and political parties to come out and speak the voice of the people or what is right for everybody. I want to say that young leadership is also a serious challenge, because we are meant, and there is always something called sugarcoating when it comes to accommodation of young people in this country. It is extremely hard for young people to get into political positions. It is also extremely hard for young people to get in the corporate level of leadership in this country. And it is a simple thing of maintenance of status quo that people look of ways to have their lineage and their fellow selves getting into those positions. But I want to say it is all not lost, because the few of us that get into these leadership positions, we have to stand strong and stand against all the chaos and atrocities that are meant to derail young people to get into positions, so that we can actually make a better community and a better society. And I want to touch something that I know Honorable Kalonzo Musyoka is dealing with in the bipartisan talks that involves our electoral system. I have heard many people say that our electoral system is actually not right, but it is the high time we got it right. And Honorable Kalonzo Musyoka, as the co-chair of the bipartisan talks, we are hoping you bring something that is going to solve that thing once and for all, so that young people can get chances to get into leadership positions. There is always deliberate efforts to suppress the leadership of young people. And it has come even into the university level. And one of the things that we have taken as young parliamentarians is to correct that. We need to go back to the voices of our university students having something to speak. The leadership of this time does not really reflect what we used to see before. Myself, I started my leadership in the University of Nairobi, in the leadership of SONU. Many of my members started there. But right now, we have a system that is using some sort of delegates, and we no longer get the voice of the university student, who should actually have a voice for the benefit of this country. If you speak to Honorable Raila Odinga, Honorable Orengo, and the rest, they will tell you how important that voice was when there was Moi of this world. There is also something I want to touch on, which is the mismanagement of institutions touching with our young people. And I'm happy that the government has recognized that, and there are deliberate efforts to correct the mismanagement of institutions touching with our young people. NYS, one of the institutions that used to touch lives in the 90s, these days is a shell. But we need to actually empower these institutions so that our young people can be able to do better. I was very happy to listen to PS Mangeni, whose department actually is at the heart of the young people. I wish you well. And all those deliberate efforts you guys are making, we have to hold you into account. I have one proposal for you. Hustler Fund is a good thing, but we cannot remain at 500 shillings or 1,000 because it will not actually help a lot. We need to get into million. We need to get into 500,000 so that our young people can be deliberately helped to grow economically. And I believe that is something that you have to consider and you are considering. I want to say that when it comes to opportunities, we need to empower our youth wing, the political parties. Because political parties in Kenya, and I hope I don't get in trouble because of this, they are owned by individuals, and they are not owned by the young people. And that means that for you to get anywhere, you have got to be in the right books with the bosses who own these political parties. That is actually a retrogressive thing that we should actually correct and move forward from there. Because while we are talking of improvement of our economy, our democracy, and we are very loud saying about democracy when it comes to general elections, but nominations and running of political parties is the biggest scandal we have in this country. We have to correct that. Let the democracy of our country political party level so that we can improve the democracy of our country. On economy, yesterday, before I came for the State of the Nation, I was attending farmers conference. There are some farmers that I have helped to get water project, and I want to tell you that that meeting was attended by very many people, but all of them were above 60 years of age. Not even one single young person. That means our youths are not participating in agriculture. Our youths don't have an opportunity to participate in agriculture. Shock many that 70% of our population is young people, but they are not being productive in production of our food. And I want to say that, and I have advised government many times, that we have to have means of getting our young people to farms. We cannot all be hustlers lying around. We cannot all go to border sector. We have to have our youths being empowered and being given opportunity to get into farming. When I was sharing lunch with the Honorable Raila Odinga and the Honorable Kalonzo Musyoka, we had a very interesting conversation of ensuring that we get our people to consolidate land so that that land can be productive enough and our young people can be used in the production. And then many people can be given the affordable housing that we are giving, that is actually a government plan, and be able to grow our economy together. And I think that is something that I propose that can be done. In conclusion, I want to say that African leadership has always been born from struggle. In 1963, when we were getting our independence, the struggle was about freedom. And we had Mau Mau and everybody else who fought for that. In the 90s, where we had birth to Honorable Kalonzo Musyoka, Honorable Raila Odinga, and many others, we were struggling for democracy, and we struggled. Now, we have another struggle to have our economic freedom. As young politicians and young leaders, we are taking that as a fight that we have to win. And thank you very much, everybody. We are going to continue engaging in this conversation. I want to say that, yes, this conversation has been organized by KES, but this is a conversation that should be organized by the government of Kenya. To be organized by Kenyans, because it is us who have the problem, and it is us to solve our problems. All we need is to be supported by our diplomatic corps to sana. Mungu awabariki. Thank you very much. Is it on me?
Yes, because you are the moderator. I want to collect one issue. Just 2 minutes.
Okay, 1 minute. Very quickly.
Yes, yesterday I talked about Kenya at 60. It is always good when you are a reader, you give the correct figure. We have transformed from 1963 to where we are. It took me 6 months to get an ID card. Today, and I was walking 20 kilometers to my DO. Today, you just go to the Huduma Center and get a vote. So, Honorable Matere Tafadhali, where are you?
Okay, thank you very much. God bless you. Thank you. You can clap for me. Thank you.
Another round of applause for our young leaders. They shared their take on what could be done to transform this nation and how the citizens could benefit from the economic transformation that the country is experiencing. Without wasting much time, the next speaker, a guest speaker that I'm welcoming, he's a Kenyan politician who was the 10th Vice President of the Republic of Kenya from 2008 to 2013. He also served in the government under the late President Daniel Arap Moi as the Secretary of Kenya African National Union Party, and that's between 1980 and 1988. He also served as the Assistant Minister for Works, that's between 1986 and 1988, and Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly between 1988 and 1992. He has also served, for your information, as the Minister for Foreign Affairs from 1993 until 1998, as well as the Minister for Education 1998 to 2001. Our guest has also subsequently, under the rather late President Mwai Kibaki administration, he was the Minister, was the Minister of Foreign Affairs, I beg your pardon, again from 2003 to 2004, and then Minister for Environment from 2004 to 2005. He was unsuccessful candidate in the 2007 presidential election, after which he was appointed vice president by the late Mwai Kibaki. We can say much about him. He's the party leader, Wiper Party, and something that he doesn't know is that he's my ward mate at Sekuru. Sekuru Ward, and His Excellency, I know I have been transformed. So he cannot recognize me, but I want to appreciate him because when I was very, very small as the vice president, this time he was in Serena and my mom had just passed on. And so we ran to Serena and he helped us clear the bills and we were able to bury our mom. I know you don't remember, but that really happened. So it's my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Stephen Kalonzo Musyoka. Welcome, sir.
Well, you see, even from Sekuru, you're beautiful girls. Well, what an afternoon. My friend there was a little agitated about transformative achievements. I'll give you a joke before I make my actually written submission, because it's important for us as a nation, together with our development partners and international friends. A friend sent me a tweet yesterday, and they said, just sample this, because it tells you the state of hopelessness that we are faced with as a country. He said, I'm going to get my burial certificate and keep it in my pocket because by the time I die, this thing will be costing 1 million shillings. What does that tell you? And yesterday, listening to President Ruto and talk about reality checks, this is the reality of our times. Incremental unemployment. But lest I go astray, let me thank you, Madam Annette Swander, Konrad Adenauer Stiftung. I'm not as good in German as my brother Raila Odinga, and you hear that. And also acknowledge Caroline Cantor, Deputy Director for European and International Cooperation. We set off for CAS, not the Kenyan CAS, we CAS, but KAS. The headquarters in Berlin, as you know, for extending to me this afternoon's invitation to speak to this distinguished assembly. And I thank you, my brother, my senior brother, Raila Amolo Odinga, who is our party leader and our team leader, for agreeing to come and do the closing session. I know that this was organized at a very high level, and yesterday, Kenya Kwanza team may have, without them knowing, or whether it was deliberate, they managed to downgrade this very important assembly, because we are all in the printed. I assume before this time these things go out, everybody will have said yes, we'll try and make time available. But if they are represented by my little sister Susan, and how you have grown, so be it. A closer examination, ladies and gentlemen, of the history of caste, they were here, which was founded on December 20th, 1955, by members of Germany's most successful political party, the Christian Democratic Union, CDU, is quite revealing. There was widespread agreement that no party, no man or woman would usurp democratic institutions ever again after the Second World War. There was widespread agreement that the best option for Germany was, quote unquote, a social market economy, a combination of free market capitalism, strong government regulation, and a comprehensive welfare state. The CDU's success can be attributed to two men, Konrad Adenauer, the party's first leader and German chancellor from 1949 to 1963, and whose legacy of freedom and democracy this wonderful foundation Konrad bears. And Ludwig Erhard, widely regarded as the father of Germany's economic miracle, who served as Adenauer's economics minister before succeeding him as chancellor in 1963. Combined with the United States stimulus package to Europe, which was then dumped, the Marshall Plan of 1948, which brought extensive investment to Europe, leading to the war-ravaged continent, indeed then West Germany's resurgence. The embrace of the transformative spirit of national dialogue was at the heart of Germany's post-World War II economic and political success, a model that is studied on a regular basis worldwide. Of course, I was asked to talk about transformative dialogue. I therefore consider today's topic that I've been asked to remark upon, transforming a nation through dialogue, both timely and relevant in light of current events in our country. National dialogues, I use the plural, also known as popular consultations or national conferences, bring together representatives from various political parties to discuss issues and challenges associated with the political transition. They have grown in popularity in recent decades as a means of achieving long-term peace and resolving key concerns such as ethnic and religious discord, as well as electoral mismanagement. These national dialogues can be used to build trust, increase participation, and forge consensus among national actors and the civil society in critical political, economic, and social decisions in the aftermath of an election or in the aftermath of a conflict. Guatemala, East Timor, Nepal, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, DRC, Niger, more recently, Mali, and Kenya, Afghanistan, Iraq, and Yemen are among the countries that have conducted NDP's national dialogues in various forms. I have personally mediated national dialogues in Somalia, in South Sudan. In fact, in the case of Somalia, because their problem was ethnicity, clanism. They're all Muslim, all Muslim. But because they belong to small sub-clans, they have been at war with each other since the fall of Siad Barre in 1991. So I said the Mkambo Uko anaitwa clan anaitwa Digli Mirifli, perchance to be able to get them out. We did the best we can to negotiate the conflict with Somalia, and as you heard, even as we speak, our men and women in uniform, mainly men, are still in that neighboring country. I also was able to do some work in South Sudan and DRC. In fact, with regard to Burundi, with the late Mwalimu Julius Nyerere, we even imposed economic sanctions to try to get Warundi hawa na Rwanda waishi kama ndugu na dada. It didn't work. Then I realized economic sanctions don't actually work in the majority of these conflict situations. Of course, we did with mixed but mostly positive results. I can state unequivocally that I am a staunch supporter of this mode of discourse in order to prevent political conflict caused by ethnic and religious disharmony, as well as electoral malpractice. You will recall after the fall of the Berlin Wall, Madam Annette, she's in your country, when President Reagan famously told Mr. Gorbachev in Moscow, Mr. Gorbachev, bring down this wall. And with it, the collapse of communism and the bipolar confrontation. And then, of course, the end of the Cold War. So the world had expected that we would then all reap what was referred to as a peace dividend, Amani Kokoten. But nobody knew that a new form of conflict was emerging based on religion. So we have now had hot wars based on what people believe. Now, Kenya's national conversations before and after independence arrived with both acrimony and compromise. From the European settlers who petitioned the British Secretary of State for colonies for representation in the Kenya administration in 1905 to the establishment of a legislative council, popularly known as LEGICO then, and his first all-European sitting on August 17, 1907. My brother Raila is very good with this history. I listened to him the other day when he was launching the Mau Mau Foundation, very detailed on how the Lunatic Express, among other things, brought about change. In 1954, Chief Colonial Secretary Walter Coutts' commission investigated ways for Africans to elect their representatives. As a result, the elections ordinance was amended to allow for the election of 8 African representatives from 8 electoral areas, with the first elections held in March 1957. The Lennox-Boyd Constitution, which increased African seats by 6 and provided for 12 specially elected members to be chosen by LEGICO, was closely followed by the 1960 Lancaster House Constitutional Conference, which increased LEGICO seats to 65. Set aside 33 for Africans. Does this ring a bell, ladies and gentlemen? We're still wrestling with the Supreme Court advisory on ability to bring into operationalize the 2/3 gender rule. Lancaster II, held in 1962, was a more ambitious dialogue that resulted in the establishment of a bicameral legislature comprising a lower house, House of Representatives, and an upper house, the Senate, with members elected by universal adult suffrage, as well as 7 regional assemblies, known then as Majimbo, to ensure maximum decentralization of government powers. During the 3rd and final Lancaster House Constitutional Review Conference in February 1963, an agreement for Kenya's independence was reached and came into effect on June 1st, 1963, a day we celebrate today as our Madaraka, or Self-Determination Day. 6 months later, the Union Jack was lowered for the last time on Kenyan soil at midnight on December 12, 1963, at Uhuru Gardens, Nairobi, to great jubilation, and then the colors of our national flag unveiled. The dream of a free and independent nation was realized after 58 years of agonizingly acrimonious, ego-bruising, and time-consuming national dialogue between European settlers, Africans, Asians, Arabs, and the British government. From the scramble for Africa, which ironically took place in your wonderful country again, Berlin, a conference of 1895, the young protectorate evolved into a colony, and finally, an independent republic led by Africans. It is critical for this distinguished gathering to reflect on our history, even as the younger ones, the youth budge. 70% of you in this room are aged below 40, in fact 35. So we do these things in order to pass it over to you, so you know where we have come from. As a renowned Spanish-American philosopher, George Santayana, wrote in his book, The Life of Reason, The Life of Reason, as part of a series, Great Ideas of Western Man, Western Man, in 1905. I quote, "Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it." We should never repeat colonialism in our country. And Mr. Julius Malema is in town. He speaks with such passion about these things. Kenya's foundation has generally remained stable. But over time, political developments, including 24 amendments to the Independence Constitution, seriously undermined both our socio-economic and democratic processes. This included the dissolution of 7 majimbos and the unification of the 2 houses to form the unicameral legislature in 1966, with a lot of serious political ramifications. The proclamation of a de jure one-party state by the National Assembly in June 1982 crowned it all. Autocratic rule, ethnic favoritism, and ethnic violence, particularly in the provinces of Nairobi, Coast, and the Rift Valley, and pervasive, indeed, systematic corruption. With the repeal of Section 2A of our country's constitution in 1991, Kenya entered a new phase of dialogue that culminated in the return to multipartyism in 1992. At that conference, actually, I was the master of ceremony when we were decided to repeal. Mzee Moi said, he was amazing. He was such a mobilizer. He got all of us to say, we don't want any amendment, anything. And then he himself stood up and said, we must accept it. 6 years later, in November 1997, the minimum reforms package through the Interparliamentary Group, famously known as IPPG, carried out parliamentary reforms that included amending Public Order Act, Cap 56, to facilitate freedom of assembly, amending Section 33 of the Constitution so that the nomination of members of Parliament was based on party strength and including the opposition's voice in the electoral body's makeup, the IEBC. This had hitherto been the president's exclusive prerogative. The historic victory of the National Rainbow Coalition, and my brother and I were key in this in the general election of December 2002, as well as equally significant concession of defeat by the presidential candidate of the ruling party, then our brother Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta, were, in my opinion, promissory products of the IPPG dialogue. I find it noteworthy that Kenyans were voted at the time the world's most optimistic people before and during the election. This was in accordance with the Gallup International Annual End-of-Year Survey, which involved interviews with over 67,500 people in 65 countries between November and December of 2002. However, the sentimental optimism was fleeting, as several agreements in our famous MOU between the coalition members, right? And we were signing. My brother Raila and I were on the rainbow side, and Mudi Awori, the late George Saitoti, and then Kibaki and Malwa, and you know that famous thing. Had that MOU document been respected, this country would have grown in leaps and bounds, would have avoided the outcome of the 2000 elections, for example. Was following a High Court ruling, the recommendations made the Constitution of Kenya Review Commission, the CKRC, during the Bomas Constitutional Conference process, which favored a parliamentary system, were discarded. As a result, the public and a section of government officials became dissatisfied with the Mwai Kibaki administration. In a referendum held on November 21, 2005, Kenyans in 7 out of the 8 provinces overwhelmingly rejected the government-sponsored proposed new constitution. We then used to refer to it as the Kilifi draft. And we used to blame Attorney General Emeritus Amos Wako for that product. My brother Raila and I, again, were in the forefront in opposing it, and then the birth of the Orange Movement. Susan, you remember, that's how you came in now, when the country was divided between bananas and oranges. Over 1,200 Kenyans lost their lives in less than a month following the announcement of the results of 2007 presidential election, where my brother and Kibaki were tough contenders. I was among them. I used to say nitapita katikati yao. Remember? I looked at these two giants, and I looked at myself and said, this David fellow, yeah, Kibaki huyu, Raila huyu, nitapita hapo katikati. And actually, to some extent, I did, because because that is how I was able to hold the two of them again. I became the nexus. I became the gum when the country was falling apart. It is particularly noteworthy that my party then, the Orange Democratic Movement Kenya, I used to say, between me and Raila, we didn't even know how to divide the oranges. Because he kept a whole orange, and I kept an orange and a half. So, my own party then, that time, ODM Kenya, negotiated a post-electoral agreement with President Kibaki's PNU that helped stop the violence, at least, before my brother was brought on board by Kofi Annan. And you know, that was a serious conflict. That is what gave rise to Kenyan leaders going to The Hague. And you know them. And sometimes blame the wrong people. I've heard some of them blame Raila. And it's not right at all. I undertook an impossible task of trying to convince the United Nations Security Council to allow us to have Kenyan leaders tried here. And then Kenyans overwhelmingly, through local radio stations, used to say, don't be vague, go to The Hague. So, under the auspices of Kenya National Dialogue and Reconciliation Committee, Dr. Kofi Annan, the late brother and a real Pan-Africanist, the chairman of the panel of eminent African personalities, was tasked by the international community and, of course, the African leadership to help to resolve that political crisis. And on February 1st, 2008, he brought the late Mwai Kibaki and our brother Raila Odinga to the negotiating table, and where the 4 agenda items were agreed upon, namely, Agenda 1, immediate action to stop the violence and restore fundamental rights and liberties. Agenda item number 2, immediate measures to address the humanitarian crisis and promote healing and reconciliation. Agenda item number 3, how to overcome the political crisis. And agenda item number 4, addressing the long-term issues, including undertaking constitutional, legal, and institutional reforms, land reform, tackling poverty and inequality, as well as combating regional development imbalances, tackling unemployment, particularly among the youth, consolidating national cohesion and unity, and addressing transparency, accountability, and impunity. That was a major agenda, and it was, to a large extent, achieved, except for agenda item number 4. And I must move faster. Agendas 1, 2, and 3 were faithfully carried out. And on February 28, 2008, President Kibaki and Right Honorable Odinga signed the agreement on the principles of partnership of the coalition government. In part, the preamble affirmed, I quote, there must be real power sharing to move the country forward and begin the healing and the reconciliation process. With this agreement, we are stepping forward together as political leaders to overcome the current crisis and set the country on a new path. This agreement is designed to create an environment conducive to such a partnership and to build mutual trust and confidence. We have agreed to enact the National Accord and Reconciliation Act, end of the quote, signed by the 2 leaders. Following the passage of the Kenya Constitution Review Act 2008, Kenya Constitution Amendment Act 2008 by Parliament, the process of drafting a new constitution, detailed in Agenda 4, began. 2 years later, And through a people-driven national dialogue, the Constitution of Kenya 2010 was finally promulgated to widespread acclaim at home, regionally, and internationally. Even though this living document is acknowledged as one of Africa's most progressive constitutions, there are still some aspects of its composition that, in its 13th year of existence, require serious deliberation. We in the Azimio la Umoja One Kenya coalition hold the view that we cannot transform our beloved nation if we do not fundamentally address those Agenda 4 issues of 2008 and those concerns that we have outlined in the National Dialogue Committee, which have christened NADCO, and which I'm happily, as fate would have it, a co-chair. Our top priority, which was to address the cost of living, is demonstrated by the growing gaps in poverty and inequality brought about by harsh and burdensome taxes that take money out of people's pockets rather than putting it therein. And Susan, you're in the business trying to get people to put their money in their pockets. You haven't quite succeeded. Because this is where the issue is. Kenyans are crying, heavy burden of taxation. I have never seen a nation anywhere in the world which can develop on the basis of overtaxing its citizens, particularly during such economic reality. And if anybody has one example in the world, yeah, we talked of the Marshall Plan and others, where you overtax your citizen in order to get out of depression, I will be happily able to listen to you. Despite the conflicting explanations, the primary causes of economic slow growth, indeed depression, are not solely attributable to global events, but rather economic mismanagement and endemic corruption. The last 3 presidential election results are strongly disputed, indicating that we have not addressed transparency, accountability, and impunity, particularly regarding our electoral management process. That is why we in Azimio la Umoja One Kenya Alliance Coalition insisted upon not only audit of 2022 general election, but a reconstitution of the Independent Electoral Boundaries Commission. We too in this NADCO process spoke to the deepening of our political gains by ensuring there will be fidelity to the Constitution as regards interference with political parties. The story that has been going on, merry-go-round in Jubilee, I'm a very key member of Azimio la Umoja One Kenya coalition. It's disturbing. We have had to call a spade a spade. In these talks, we are not sparing any situation. And we are saying it is improper to disorganize Jubilee. Because by disorganizing Jubilee, you are trying to disorganize Azimio. And by implication, paying lip service to multi-party democracy. And this is our view. Our agenda items at the bipartisan talks at Bomas of Kenya also included addressing the imbalance of public office appointments that were biased towards specific communities and poorly represented the aspirations of two-gender rule. This, we strongly argued, continued to undermine the ideals of national cohesion and unity. I would want, for example, a very honest conversation about the recently concluded recruitment at the Kenya Defense Forces. Mukwanja and the rest of you in Parliament, please, if you want to heal this country, and I heard the President yesterday say 80% of recruitment to KDF now will be from National Youth Service, but before we get there, we want the statistics, ethnic balance. By the way, it's a matter in the Constitution. We want to know, of the 43 communities, what percentage did the people in Embu in Manyata get? And you will be amazed. And when I go to the conflict in Rwanda after the genocide, in fact, the problem in Rwanda and Burundi is basically this. 84% of the population are Hutus in both countries, and 14% are Tutsis in both countries. At some stage, The whole leadership of Burundi, from the president to deputy speaker, were eliminated because they went through a hugely successful election, where if it is the majority must have their way and the minority have their say, that happened. But people were hurting. And what happened? Killings. So, in my view, if you disturb the army, if you do not have a professional military in Kenya or anywhere in the region, ladies and gentlemen, you do not have a country. Please, you can take that one to the bank, even if it is a hustler bank. You cannot disturb if you, and the reason our military men and women have done very well in terms of peacekeeping everywhere, right, is because we have had a professional army. But if we have a tribalized army, and I still insist, I want you guys, if the parliament, I'm told when you people in Kenya Kwanza went to State House and complained to President Ruto that amwezi kwenda nyumbani, wananchi wanapigia kelele because of taxation, he looked at you and told you, but you are the ones in parliament. Nyinyi ndio mmepitisha the Finance Act. So you now have to play your role. If you're going to do oversighting of this government, and I like the young parliamentarians, actually went in at 30, and I remained there. Yes, I think I should have been a member. Now I'll do the mentoring that our wonderful Mheshimiwa was talking about. I must conclude, ladies and gentlemen, before I invite our brother to come and make his remarks and close this consultative session. You know, we went to Bomas because Kenyans lost their lives. Kenyans, some of them wearing sufurias, right? Let's not forget we buried nearly 70 people. Let's not forget a lot of them had their households and everything they owned destroyed. And even as recent as 2 weeks ago, 25,000 people in Mavoko had what they call their homes destroyed. And we hear you friends in Kenya Kwanza telling us affordable housing. What the fellows have put together what they could afford, and you destroy it, and you are telling them affordable housing? So, ladies and gentlemen, we cannot hope to transform our nation, indeed any nation, without meaningful dialogue, and that is built on mutual trust and confidence. Nonetheless, I've observed that during our 73 days, we've already done 73 days of the national dialogue, goodwill has occurred, and both sides have learned to respect one another's points of view. Therefore, I must congratulate my friend, my co-chair, Kimani Ichung'wah. When he came in, I told Kimani, I looked at him, I said, listen, you are young, I think you're very young, and the future is ahead of you. Me, I can go back to Sekuru, right, and forget about you guys. But if you don't succeed at these talks, history will judge you badly. And we must therefore confront the truth, and nothing but the truth. Our forefathers, the likes of Mzee Jomo Kenyatta and Jaramogi Oginga Odinga, were able to negotiate and compromise even with the British colonialists. When Mzee Jaramogi Oginga Odinga said, without Jomo Kenyatta, there will be no freedom. Now, we should emulate them. 26 years ago, the late President Daniel Arap Moi's ruling party, KANU, by the way, KANU was organizing secretary for 12 good years. I was elected national organizing secretary the same day with the late Moses Mundamba Mudavadi, Wycliffe's father. So you can see if Mudavadi is beginning to look old. I started it with his late father. That is a beauty. When you are young, you see it all. And I therefore can pass this information, this wisdom, sometimes lack of it, depending on how you look at it, to the younger leaders. Mzee Moi then was able to accommodate dialogue. After the violence that followed 2007 elections and almost tore our nation apart, Mzee Kibaki, our brother Raila, and indeed myself, with our respective coalitions, were able to come together and work on creating a durable new constitution. Our history is replete with examples of transformative national dialogue for the betterment of all Kenyans. We at Azimio la Umoja One Kenya Alliance Coalition remain optimistic that these bipartisan talks, which should conclude with a report handed to both my friend William Ruto and my brother here on November 22nd. We are very clear. We don't want to stay there for longer than is necessary. And some of them say we are paid huge sums of money. I've not seen a cent. I'm giving my time and my everything to my country so that these things can succeed. Ladies and gentlemen, it is now my great pleasure to invite my brother and actually a soulmate, the Right Honorable Raila Amolo Odinga, to come make his remarks and close this session. Well, we thank our partners, really. You know, German, you Kenyans may not know, CD1, the diplomatic corps, the number one, and to get number one CD, diplomatic corps, number one, means a lot. CD1, when we became independent, was Germany. And that tells you that Germans are truly our friends. We thank you. We continue to thank you. And my brother Raila Odinga, karibu sana. Sorry.
Yeah. You may be seated. To the Konrad Adenauer Foundation, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, hamjambo. Hamjambo tena. I'm happy to have been invited by Konrad Adenauer Foundation to come and be with you here this afternoon. Dankeschön. That means thank you very much. And I mean, my brother has talked so elaborately about so many things. At some stage, he was talking about desperation in our country, how Kenyans are dying because of lack of food and so on. Then I was telling some other people that maybe death is not a very bad thing. Shakespeare said in Julius Caesar that some cowards die so many times before their death that the brave do not taste of death but just once. And I want to say that death is a necessary evil that will come when it will come. And therefore there's no need to fear death. Then the other day I was talking to somebody else, he told me, you shouldn't really fear death. He said that, look, if you are sick, there are only two things that can happen to you. Either you will be treated and you will get well, they have nothing to fear. But if you don't recover, then you die. If you die, there's nothing to fear. Why? Because you will either go to heaven or to hell. If you go to heaven, there's nothing to worry about. You will be okay. Even if you go to hell, there's nothing to worry about. You'll find so many of your friends. So spend a long time just greeting them. How are you? How have you been here? before your time for the fire comes. So, so therefore, don't fear. You have nothing to fear as Kenyans. We will succeed in the long run. Now, I think this foundation has done a very good thing to choose to hold this conference. And they have told me that they're going to make it an annual event. So it is my real pleasure to speak to this distinguished audience at a time the country is undergoing profound challenges with no end in sight. My task is to share with you the alternative economic pathways proposed by the Azimio la Umoja One Kenya Coalition Party for the people of Kenya. I will do that with pleasure. But before I do that, let me thank the Konrad Adenauer Foundation, Stiftung, as it's called in German, for putting together this conference on the subject of transforming a nation. It is proper that a foundation that bears the name of the man who presided over the reconstruction of Germany after the Second World War should get us together so that we can discuss our own reconstruction. I happen to have been in Germany during its days of reconstruction and transformation, and I can say two things without fear of contradiction. First, transforming a nation takes hard, dedicated, and honest labor of leaders and citizens. Secondly, no nation is beyond reconstruction and transformation. All it takes is leadership. And I arrived when the war had ended, the Marshall Plan had been introduced, and the work of reconstruction was in its second phase. I have found when Konrad Adenauer himself was still the chancellor, and at that time when he arrived, when you went to Germany, and then you went to Britain and France, who are part of the victor powers, you'd think that it was Germany that won the war, and those countries had lost the war. But Germany had been devastated. Most German cities were bombed, some of them nearly to the ground. There's a city in the eastern part of Germany called Dresden. Dresden was razed almost to the ground by the British, basically, at the time when, in fact, the war had ended. But because of the anger of what had happened, bombing of London and so on, it was a revenge bombing. But the Germans reconstructed. And at that time, West Germany was the strongest economy in Western Europe. And East Germany was also the strongest economy in Eastern Europe at that time. That was basically because of hard work. I want to say that a year after our election, if you ask Kenyans, are you better off today than you were at the time, this time last year? The answer will be obvious, that we are in a deep hole. Failing policies and grim economic prospects. There's a devastating loss of trust and confidence in our economy, our financial markets, and our government. We are caught in a cycle where reduced spending power leads to loss of jobs, which leads to even less spending, where the people can't borrow because rates charged are too high, yet lack of borrowing slows growth and leads to even less credit. Credible data collected and published by the government confirms all this grim news. And this meeting is taking place as a day after the State of the Nation address by the President. I'm going to try to answer some of the things that he said yesterday. But this is not a response. At the Hustler Fund, which was supposed to support households and micro enterprises, default on payments at a higher rate than those at the commercial banks, SACCOs, and microfinance. Out of the Hustler Fund's outstanding, that is 10.2 billion shillings worth of loans in the last 9 months, 29% is deemed to be portfolio at risk, implying it has not been serviced by the borrowers as per agreed schedule. This means that borrowed amounts worth about 2.9 billion shillings in Hustler Fund loans fall in the category of non-performing loans. Job cuts are back to the rate where they were during the COVID. According to the CBK survey, more than a quarter of chief executives expect to cut jobs before the end of the year because of increased operating costs and softening demand for goods and services, setting up families for a gloomy festivities period. The Central Bank of Kenya is the survey that targeted CEOs of more than 1,000 private sector firms through online questionnaires shows that 26.3% of those surveyed expect to cut their workforce between now and the end of the year, while 63.5% will not be hiring any new staff. At the Nairobi Securities Exchange, some 6,256 foreign investors fled in the last 9 months. This is 42% of foreign investors in the country. This exodus is a result of the rapid but unstable tax policies that are scaring away foreign investors and leading to low revenue collections. In October, the same National Security Exchange was ranked the worst performing African bus in the first 9 months of the year in dollar returns. Investors prefer a country with a stable taxation policy, a stable currency, and a growing economy. The current regime is changing tax policy frequently, mismanaging the shilling, and weakening economic growth. Kenyans are ditching mobile payments. A number of local SMEs using payment methods such as pay bills and Lipa na M-Pesa are now asking their customers to use cash when paying for goods and services to avoid taxation. Fuel consumption fell rapidly between January and June, dropping to the lowest levels in the more than 5 years. Up to 85% of firms are not paying corporate taxes. At least 8 in 10 companies in Kenya did not pay taxes on earnings last financial year. This signals a tough economic environment that hits sales, prompting some businesses to scale down operations. The Kenya Revenue Authority, KRA, missed its revenue target for the first quarter of the current financial year by 79 billion Kenya shillings. Of course, the story of the Kenya shilling on a free fall bears no repeating. It is obvious to everybody. From 120 to the dollar to now 159. I could go on and on, but I beg to stop there so that we can get into what Azimio thinks. The fact is, Many Kenyans are both anxious and uncertain of what the future holds. The country is going through a recipe of policy mistakes, failures, and shortcomings served in an authoritarian, paternalistic leadership style. Nobody in government cares about building broad public support around these programs. Everything is forced down everyone's throats. In the run-up to 2022 election, we warned that the sectors of every economy are intertwined, and you cannot benefit one sector by denying the other. We warned that Kenya Kwanza was never going to help the hustlers by robbing the rich and the middle class. In the wake of the Finance Act of 2023, we warned that no nation can ever tax its citizens into prosperity. We are concerned that it is getting too late to change the course. We fear that consequences of the foundation laid in the first year of this administration could linger for years if nothing is done. Our country could lose the competitive edge that it has always had in the region and sub-Saharan Africa. This bad situation could easily get out of hand. What is to be done? For us in Azmio, reduction in the cost of living is a priority economic imperative. This will be achieved by providing some basic relief to citizens, including reduction of taxes and stimulating production. To release resources to achieve these objectives, government must cut the budget by an estimated 500 billion shillings. The current policies have hit low-income families particularly hard. These are the same low-income families that the administration promised to lift up. These families spend more than 40% of their income on food. They deserve and require relief. In particular, we must cut fuel taxes and raise social welfare payments. At this time of duress, we demand tax cuts, not increases. Kenyans need to see their taxes go down, not up. We believe the current taxation regime is not sustainable. We warned at the beginning that beyond a certain point, increasing taxes leads to lower collection. It has become real as Kenya Revenue Authority misses one revenue target after another. Tax on fuel is up, but fuel levy collection is down. We were doing this as a result of our experience when we formed government under NASA. Under NASA, we found an economy that was stagnant, and the growth was negative. Revenue collection was very low, and the Paris Club had actually clamped down on the government. So the government was actually just limping. And when we came into government, what we did was to address the two sides of the balance sheet, income and expenditure. We found that the government was collecting 200 billion shillings of all that was being collected. We looked at the sources of revenue, customs duty, income tax, the VAT, and so on. And then the other side, expenditure, how they were procuring. You looked at revenue officers, those officers in the customs, in the income tax department, in the VAT, And procurement officers in all the ministries, they were the boys in town. They're the ones who are buying apartment blocks in town, the ones who are driving the latest models of cars, Mercedes, Toyota, what have you. They're the ones who are building castles in rural areas. They're the ones who are building high-rise buildings in village markets. If you did a lifestyle audit, you're able to catch them. And we did lifestyle audits and caught very many of them. We sacked some we sent to jail. And all of a sudden, revenue rose up. From 200 billion shillings within the 6 months from January to June, we went up by 100 billion shillings. We collected 300 billion shillings. So we said, the answer is not to increase taxes, but to spread out, widen the net, and lower the taxes, and we get more revenue. The following year, it went 500 billion, 700 billion, 900, we reached 1 trillion. We were able to finance most of our budget from local resources without having to borrow from donors. 95% of our development expenditure was coming from local revenue. And that's why we were advising the inadvisable that you don't have to increase taxes to get revenue. Procurement, because you can raise revenue, but it all just goes into people's pockets. We found that under Moi, there was a procurement law which said that any item above 100,000 shillings had to procure competitively. In other words, you had to advertise in at least 3 newspapers. And there must be at least 3 bidders, and you procure competitively. Each and every ministry has a procurement officer seconded from the treasury who was in charge. We found that each procurement officer had 3 companies registered. And there was a kind of a cartel and a collusion. The one in Ministry of Finance is supplying Ministry of Education. The one in Education is supplying health. One is health is supplying roads. One roads is supplying agriculture. And if you are the tender, there will be 3 companies. All those 3 belong to one person. And of course, the building, the commission, which is shared among various commission officers. An item that's supposed to be procured at 100,000 shillings goes for 5 million shillings. And that's where the money is being lost. These ones, again, we did lifestyle audit. We sacked some of them. We jailed some of them. The government was now procuring competitively. And that is how we manage that economy. So you need to stimulate production. Interest rates need to come down in order to stimulate economic activity. This is particularly urgent and critical, given that in the Finance Act of 2023, the regime is pursuing higher spending and taxes for the next 2 years. Businesses will obviously pass the costs to consumers, worsening the cost of living further. We needed to invest in direct relief to individuals through programs that put money directly into the people's pockets. Which is why we asked the Kenya Kwanza to continue with and expand the Kazi Mtaani program. And it can be expanded the way we did it ourselves there, Kazi kwa vijana, to the rural areas as well. Investment in labor-intensive programs like road construction, rural water systems, afforestation, and so on. This has proven over the years to yield positive results. We believe that putting money into construction of schools' infrastructure would yield better returns than the construction of houses through taxation. Kenyans deserve a raise in the average minimum wage. We should also stop mismanagement of public finances. The country must embrace better fiscal discipline. We do not have to increase our budget in order to look important. State departments with overlapping functions need to be scrapped. Why do we have coordination of international development partnerships at both the Deputy President's Office and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, complete with budget lines, while the National Treasury also runs an external resources department? At the same time, we need to stop duplication of devolved functions at national level. You have a situation where the national government is competing with the counties in several other functions which are constitutionally devolved, like health, like agriculture, like water, and so on. Why should the national government be the one procuring fertilizers and distributing it to the county government when agriculture is devolved? How about drugs and so on? A few weeks ago, the Controller of Budget told the country that the National Treasury over-budgeted salaries of state officers, including hers, by 3 times, leading to the loss of over 1 billion shillings. The Controller of Budget detailed how the Treasury has been over-budgeting salaries of senior government officials through the consolidated fund services. So far, nobody has been made to bear responsibility for this budgeted corruption. We know very well that regional authorities duplicate county functions. Where do we retain them? Complete with budgets. To those doubting Thomases within the regime, these measures above will release the estimated 500 billion shillings required to bring back the economy on an even keel. Realistic debt management. Currently, Kenya is caught in a debt rut where it has resorted to borrowing more to repay debt. It makes no sense to us to borrow more to repay debt when debt is already too high. It amounts digging when you're already in a deep hole. Our position is that the National Treasury ought to ask creditors to push up payments falling due to a future date rather than keep paying it. This is what people do when they have a crunch in their finances, but know they can pay later when their income is higher. Rescheduling debt is not at the same time as the same thing as debt default. People default when they are bankrupt. Kenya is not bankrupt. Kenya should not default. By rescheduling debt payments falling due, the government can forgo punitive taxes and create room for critical social and economic spending. In conclusion, 1 year on since the inception of new government, this is the time to reset the economic policy broadly. And you're not going to set this broadly by mere rhetorics, by talking and making promises to the people, empty promises. The effectiveness of government by key initiatives, including the Hatta Fund, should be reviewed by a forum comprised of the government, political parties, the business community, and the civil society. This is what should be happening. And if this happens, we'll be able to come up with proper solution to the problem that we're facing today. The government today is living in denial. If you listen to the State of the Nation address yesterday, if you were talking to some people who are living in planet Moon, you are not being realistic to problems confronting this country. And these problems must be confronted frontally, not by trying to give diversions here and there. We have said today that the cost of living is real and is killing the people. It has to be addressed if you are going to actually relieve the plight of the people of this country. This is our position as Azimio. Now, finally, Madam, you've written there, Raila Odinga ran for presidency 5 times and lost 5 times. In other words, and each time he complained that he did not lose. I accepted losing elections in 1997. I said I'd lost and accepted. In 2007, the jury is out there. Everybody knows what happened. In 2013, everybody knows. 2017, people know. 2022, some of you around in the country. The so-called Independent Election and Boundary Commission had 7 commissioners. Out of those 7 commissioners, 4 said no. 3 are the ones who said yes. But 4 said no. And they even have come before the Kalonzo team and have said no. And they've said that the chairman erred, that up to now he has not published the results of the elections in accordance to the law. And to me, they say that 4 is bigger than 3. If the majority say that I won the elections, I cannot say I lost it. And that's why, irrespective of what the Supreme Court said, I thank you very much.
Another round of applause for our guests this afternoon. Thank you so much for your patience. When you look at your programs, we were to end earlier, but it was important this final day we stay until this time without wasting so much time. I want to once again welcome Honorable Gitonga Mukunji so that he now finally takes us through the conference communique, some of the resolutions as we go home. Welcome, sir.
All right, thank you very much. Before I read the communique, I have seen some members of parliament who have joined us, and I would like to recognize them. I have seen Honorable Jared Okello. Please just wave to the congregation. That is a member of parliament, Nyando. I have also seen Honorable Junet Mohammed. He is a minority whip and the member of parliament, Suna East. I want to read the communique of this conference, and it is my humble duty to do that. Transforming a Nation Conference Communique. Date November 10th, 2023, in Nairobi, Kenya. Konrad Adenauer Stiftung, KAS, a distinguished German political think tank close to Christian Democratic Party with a presence in over 120 countries worldwide, spearheaded the Transforming a Nation conference held on November 9th and 10th, 2023 at Nairobi's Radisson Blu Hotel in Upper Hill. Rooted in a commitment to fostering democracy,
your businesses continue to thrive. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation. Thank you for being here today. We could not accommodate everyone that wanted to be here to talk matters economics. So if you have friends out there, we are live. We are going live shortly on Facebook, on YouTube, and on LinkedIn, again on matters economics. Karibuni sana. I hope everyone has had breakfast. With us today, we'll have a panel having a conversation on matters economics. We also have key guests joining us today. We have Dr. Koech from the Central Bank of Kenya. We have Dr. Ndi, who's the chairman of the President's Economic Council. We are waiting for him to join. We do have Dr. Ngugi in the house from Kipra. We do have Kwame Owino from IEA. And we have Job Wanjohe from KAM. We also do have our own internal chief economist, our acting group director, global markets, Rafael Agung, who will be managing our panel today, our great conversation again on matters economics as we wind down 2023 and look into 2024. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Welcome to all the customers, the special customers we can see today from manufacturing, from trade, from telcos, from energy, from religious institutions, from SACCOs, from agriculture, and our NCBA team and Oxygen team that manages our PR. Karibuni sana. Members of the Fourth Estate, you're very welcome. Thank you for continued support to NCBA and to ensure the things that we do internally are also helpful to the public at large. Ladies and gentlemen, today's conversation has been one in the waiting. The last two economic forums have been held virtually, so it's really a pleasure to be having this conversation in person, and you would get the chance to ask your questions to the esteemed panel. Make sure you have your questions ready. I understand a number of customers have already shared their requests, and we also do have media with some of the conversations and questions that are coming through from the public at large. We do have the right experts in the room, the right economic policy makers, the right people who advocate for the economy, the people that advise the government, and the people that make sure we are well-versed on matters economics, both locally, regionally, and also globally. Karibuni sana. Ladies and gentlemen, we have 9 more minutes. We start at 8. I know we are all economists and run things on time. I can see my live team ready to roll. I am waiting for one of our key guest speakers so we can start. Ladies and gentlemen, let me give a few insights on our guests today. We have Dr. Susan Koech from the Central Bank of Kenya, our Deputy Governor, a career banker that has also worked in both the public and private sector. We are really honored for her to be here today. Dr. David Ndi, a Rhodes Scholar, an economist, a public intellectual, a well-known columnist covering matters economics, Kwame, CEO of IEA, Job Wanjohi, and Dr. Rose Ngugi. Ladies and gentlemen, our Group Managing Director, Mr. John Gashora, is also present here today. We have members of the Executive Committee from NCBA. We have Louisa, our Chief of Staff and Group Director Strategy. We have Charles Omondi, Corporate Banking. We have Raphael Agung. We have Tyrus, our Group Director, Retail Banking. Karibuni sana. Karibu John. Members of the Fourth Estate, Karibuni. Citizen, Nation, K24, KBC, the Standard Group, Abojani, our different business bloggers, our esteemed team from NCBA who put this lovely event together. Karibuni sana. Ladies and gentlemen, it's still not yet 8 a.m. Is it? It is 8:04. I know matters economics need to be matters that run on time. So we are going to kick off. We are already live. For any of your friends who want to join us today, we are live on Facebook, we are live on YouTube, and we are live on LinkedIn. Ladies and gentlemen, as we await our final guest, in the room today, let me recognize our different customers who are accompanied by different NCBA colleagues. We have manufacturing, construction, real estate customers. We have the telco, we have energy, we have trade and logistics, we have the public sector, we have non-banking institutions, religious institutions, legal, practitioners, health, and education. We also have members from the diplomatic missions. We have NGOs, we have agriculture, we have SACCOs, and I can see Sankul is here. Where is Sankul? Hello? And maybe as we wait, I would like to introduce our NCBA team that takes great care of all our customers here. So if I can ask our NCBA team to be upstanding so we can see you today. We have Sankul, Sally, Nelly, Anthony, NCBA team. Thank you. Thank you for the journey, Rahab. Thank you, Raphael. Thank you. Thank you to this NCBA wonderful team for bringing together our customers. I know would not have managed to get everyone in this room. I think up to this morning, we had requests of more than 1,000 people that wanted to attend today's event. We can only take 300 people in today's event. So thank you to this team. Asanteni sana. I was actually asked to teach the crowd the NCBA club. We have an NCBA club because as go-getters, we always identify ourselves with some features. And so I'll test it and follow me and follow my cue. If you're an NCBA, you know how we do it. So let's appreciate our NCBA team, our esteemed customers, our esteemed guests. And this is how the clap goes. One more time. And one more time. That is the NCBA way, the bank that says go for it. So every time we have people that do well, that go for it, that wake up to live their dreams, that strive for more, that are fearless, that want to make a difference in the world, we do appreciate them. Thank you very much for your patience. We are almost starting. We are about to start. And thank you for joining our event this morning. With us today, we have Dr. Koech from CBK, our Deputy Governor. We have Dr. David Ndi from the Presidential Economic Council. We have Job Wanjohi from KAM. We have Kwame Owino from IEA. And we have Dr. Rose Nguge from KIPRA. These are some of the guests and panelists that we'll have for our conversation today on matters economics. Ladies and gentlemen, we are winding down 2023. The theme for today is a divergence and an outlook on 2024 matters economics, the things that we'll look out for, the insights that will drive our business, and the changes that we should expect in the next 18 months. Thank you very much for joining our occasion. We do appreciate the NCBA team that's also in the house. We have our Group Managing Director and CEO, Mr. John Gashora, in the house. We have Charles Omondi, our Group Director, Corporate Banking. We have Raphael, who's our Chief Economist and Group Director, Global Markets. We have Tyrus Muithiga, our Group Director, Retail Banking. We have Tim Armitage, our Group Director, Risk and Controls. We have Louisa Wandabwa, our Chief of Staff and Group Director, Strategy. We have members of the leadership team from NCBA. We have NCBA team and Oxygen from PR Communications. And my name is Nelly Wainaina, Group Director, Marketing, Communication, and Citizenship. I will take you through today's program. Our program will run for about 2 hours. We should be closing by about 10:30. So for today, we'll start with remarks from Group Managing Director, John. We'll then have some insights from our Chief Economist, Raphael. We'll then go to our group speakers for today. That's Dr. Ndi and Dr. Koech. And then we'll go to our panel conversation. A slight change in today's program. We will take questions immediately after the guest speakers because I know and we've anticipated enough questions coming from the customers, from media, from the public, as we're also going live. And so we'll take Q&A first, and the Q&A will be addressed by Mr. John Gashora, Dr. Ndi, Dr. Koech, and Raphael, and then we'll get into a panel conversation today. Ask as many questions as you can. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your forum. This is your opportunity to understand the future in the next 18 months, both locally and also from a global level. We will then close and we'll have a photo op and media engagements and interviews, and then we can finalize by 10:30. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you spent time last night reading Matters Economics and English, because I'm told economists are one of the best when it comes to English and analytics. And ladies and gentlemen, we are about to start. Ladies and gentlemen, it's about time. It's about time. Karibuni sana. The Deputy Governor of Central Bank, Dr. Susan Koech, the Chairperson, the President's Council of Economics, and the advisor, Dr. David Ndi, karibu saa. Our distinguished panelists, Dr. Ngugi, Mr. Wanjohi, and Mr. Kwame, karibuni. Esteemed customers, our invited guests, my NCBA colleagues, our executive committee at NCBA, members of the Fourth Estate Media, karibuni. All protocols observed, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. We are ready to start. Welcome to NCBA's 8th Economic Forum, dubbed 2024 Macroeconomic Outlook, the divergence of economies and sectors. As a key player in the financial sector, NCBA has provided thought leadership with this forum for the last 8 years. And for our customers today, we are looking at an opportunity for you to interact with the various subject matter experts on matters economics in the private and public sector. An outlook of the economy and what lies ahead for 2024 and the insights that will affect your businesses next year. So as I mentioned, the last 2 sessions have been virtual, and it's really a pleasure for us to be meeting physically in person. I know some of you are here to meet Dr. Ndi, which is amazing. He's an amazing person. But more importantly, in the room, we have customers from different sectors. As I've mentioned, we have customers from manufacturing, from trade, from religious institutions, diplomatic missions, telcos, energy, transport, trade, agriculture, circles, NGOs, karibuni sana. And to steer today's conversation, we have our esteemed panelists who will be introduced much later. And then we have our NCBA group team. And without much further ado, because we've spent enough time with the intros, I'll invite our group managing director and CEO and the host of today's forum, Mr. John Gashora, to make his remarks. Karibu, sir.
The Deputy Governor, Central Bank of Kenya, Dr. Susan Koech, the Chairperson, the President's Council of Economic Advisors, Dr. David Ndi, all our distinguished panelists, invited guests, my NCBA colleagues, members of the Fourth Estate present, all protocols observed, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It's indeed a pleasure to connect with you this morning on this platform where we meet to exchange ideas on macroeconomic environment that we find ourselves navigating in these volatile times and help shape the right public policies and debates for the respective prosperity of all our people. Public and private sector participation in the conduct of our affairs as a nation is a key invocation of a founding document, the Constitution. And as a good corporate citizen, we at NCBA take this responsibility quite seriously. For those who are active on X, formerly known as Twitter, you know that our friend David D has been engaging a lot of us there, often insulting us, David D, I must say, but in a good-natured way. So today you have a chance to ask him directly what you want to ask him on Twitter. So today, please do engage and ask him lots of questions. Also, I know that the central bank has also been attacked severely for no good reason, because they do a fantastic job. That is why a very good friend, Dr. Susan Koech, one of the best speakers of our time, will be here. So please do engage her. And please ask her those hard questions, like where are the dollars? Stop asking the banks. Although I know she will blame us again. So anyway, through the NCB Economic Forum, we will continue to bring together the best brains in a country to help us think through and solve some of the most difficult and intractable problems of our time. So thank you all again, really, for being here with us. As Nelly has said, it will be very interactive. We'll hear from these great speakers, also great panelists, but please do ask all the questions that you might have. Today's forum's theme is 2024 Macroeconomic Outlook, Divergence Across Economies and Sectors. This theme could not be more opportune. As I'm aware, we are all at the tail end of finalizing our respective business plans for 2024. We could use a little more prescience and discernment regarding tomorrow's operating environment from some of the analysts and forecasts, analysis and forecast that our panelists and speakers will be delving into shortly. Turning to the economy quickly, indeed, any objective accounting will record projected growth in 2023 output at anywhere between 4.8 to 5.2%. Indeed, according to our in-house forecast as NCBA, we now expect the 2023 GDP growth to close at about 4.9%, powered primarily by welcome resilience in services and a reversal of fortunes in agriculture output, especially in Q1 of this year. However, this accounting also reveals biting and unprecedented cost of living pressures, ravaging household balance sheets, and daily threatening to push back a good number of our people into wrenching poverty. Headline inflation, although within bands, remains a little elevated at 6.9% in October and averaging about 8% year to date. Expectedly thus, tough conversations continue to dominate most of our public debates. In fact, economic uncertainty headlines many newspaper editorials these days. Here, for instance, is the Nation newspaper editorial just this past Thursday, and I quote, "There is more pain ahead for Kenyans as prices and fees for basic services continue to skyrocket. Life has become increasingly difficult for the majority of low-income earners as the government strives to boost revenue collection to meet its obligations. Life under the first year of President Ruto's administration has been tough, with a raft of steep tax increases. This has angered the people, with the opposition decrying the high cost of living." End of quote. This was from the Nation newspaper this past Thursday. And if you don't believe the ex-president that magazeti ni ya kufanya nini? Ni kufunga nyama, at least let's remember that one quote. End of quote. Evidently, in important respects, it would seem that the gulf between lived experience at the household and enterprise level and reported national account numbers appears to have widened in the recent past. In America, they say that what Wall Street experiencing has not made its way onto Main Street. In Kenya, the question is, why is it that Upper Hill, a financial center, feels so different than the estates? I think that's the question of debate today. How come the headline numbers are so good, yet all of us, when we strip back to our households, we're all feeling the pain? I think that is the question everybody is trying to understand, and hopefully today we'll get to understand that better. But in all frankness, this divergence is not entirely new. It goes back to the weaknesses in national income accounting frameworks that are not entirely insignificant, given the prominence some of these data and numbers take as we craft our public policies. However, this age-old debate aside, there's no question that despite the biting cost of living challenge, significant progress continues to be made, and that's perhaps where you see the numbers looking very good. Since taking office slightly over a year ago, the government has continued to make the necessary adjustments that will be required to restore more durable macroeconomic stability, which remains a key prerequisite for long-term growth. And I think here I should quote that Mr. D has reminded us that we have had to make some tough choices. And these tough choices are not felt on the street fast enough, but eventually they will. They are necessary for bringing in the required macroeconomic progress. On the monetary policy side, for instance, the Monetary Policy Committee has sustained a steady and significant adjustment of the policy rate, and the necessary transmission mechanisms have continued to reprice the yield curve quite significantly throughout this year. I must say that's one of the most commendable and tough decisions that the CBK has made this year, to move quickly to make those tough decisions on the monetary side, on raising interest rates. We have also seen the administration roll out significant fiscal adjustments with an outlined multi-step fiscal consolidation path anchored at a target deficit of 3% of GDP and a medium-term revenue strategy necessary to achieve this. Again, when you hear the president and the central bank talk about fiscal consolidation, it sounds very easy to do. But let me remind you, that is one of the hardest things for any government to do. And this government has committed to do that, to reduce our deficit to 3%. And I want to quote back a statement that was made by the late US President Ronald Reagan back in 1964. I go that far back. I'm not that old. It's on YouTube. Back in 1964. And he said that the truth about governments is governments know how to create. They do not know how to destroy. So governments, you always create. If one agency is not working, they don't finish that agency, they create another one. And they have a board, and they have people working there. If it's not working, they create another one. And so you end up having all these, so governments know how to get big. They don't know how to get small, but we have a government that has committed to reduce deficit. That means government that is committed to actually looking at some things and making reforms that sometimes would destroy what is not necessary. So that's also very commendable. On the real sector, we continue to see the operationalization of the bottom-up economic transformation agenda with its key emphasis on agricultural transformation, micro, small, and medium enterprise economy, healthcare, housing and settlement, and the digital superhighway, as well as the creative industry. Admittedly, some of these adjustments on the monetary and fiscal side were always going to be hard, even if necessary. To be sure, the musings from the editorial I just captioned broadly demonstrates this fact, that whatever actions that are being taken are going to be hard. And obviously the editorial was reflecting what we feel on the states as opposed to how we feel, as I said, in Upper Hill, the financial district. With these growth positive adjustments, we now expect, as I said before, GDP to grow at 4.9% in 2023, and indeed maintain the current trends into 2024. So looking ahead, our internal forecast projects GDP to grow by about 5.1% in 2024. That's very positive. Whereas this is in contrast to about 6.1%, 5.7%, and 7% respectively that we project for Tanzania, Uganda, and Rwanda. Kenyan enterprises with operations in the greater East African community markets, this roundly strong economic performance across these markets should be good news for potential 2024 outcomes. More specifically for Kenya, though we expect the projected growth to come with pronounced divergence across the different economic sectors, We expect the services sector to register good performance in 2024. However, broad economic strain could see some pockets of the sector grow below their pre-COVID levels. Agricultural output, on the other hand, is likely to expand by about 5%, according to our projections. To be sure, we expect agri-export flows, including coffee, tea, and horticultural crops, to remain within their long-term average trend that we have seen before. Overall, therefore, we remain quite optimistic on 2024 prospects. The risks to this outlook, of course, are many, but largely stem from an even more uncertain external environment. If indeed there is divergence between what Upper Hill and the states are feeling, I think the global divergence is even bigger. Notably, global long-term interest rates have shot up significantly. The 10-year US Treasuries are already around 5%, a multi-year high, while events in the Middle East, as we know, have cast more shadow over energy markets, as we were told by our CS for Energy, and outlook more broadly. This rate outlook is likely to remain elevated given last week's pronouncements from the Fed Reserve of the United States. Indeed, the new higher for longer remains so far the accepted wisdom of global monetary policy today. And I hope we'll hear a bit more from our DG this morning on this issue. Even this, it is fair to say that notable divergence on either side of the Atlantic remains. While the IMF now projects faster growth in the US, the broader Eurozone is forecast to contract in this forecasting horizon. So as I alluded to already, these vicious and divergences from the external and domestic fronts do raise significant challenges to the promise of the much-needed macroeconomic stability. So with that, allow me to pause and invite our Chief Economist, NCB Chief Economist, Mr. Raphael Agum, to amplify some of these visuals that I just talked about as we see them and set the context for some of the thoughts of our distinguished speakers and panelists who will be walking us through. Welcome, Raphael.
Morning, everyone. Thank you, John, for that wonderful overview. Those who've been in the room longer than 30 minutes are aware that we've sort of flipped the program. So with that, I'm mindful that you need to hear our distinguished speakers. David is particularly innovating, but even Dr. Susan Koech, I'm sure all of you want to listen to that. So I will not waste any time. As a matter of fact, when your boss summarizes your entire presentation in 7 minutes, as John has done, all you can do is say, I hope you've heard what has been said. But what I'll do is, John has attempted a very delicate sort of argument there, for those of you who are keenly watching, which is to try and locate the current state of angst and public outcry regarding the stage of the business cycle and the adjustments that the government is making both on the fiscal side and the monetary policy side, and then situate that quite ably with what we are seeing in terms of overall headline trends, which is, as is already said, we project to close 2023 at 4.9% and then slightly go higher to 5.1% for 2024. That gulf, that is explained, of course, goes back to just how national income accounting frameworks work. But the positivity in it, and this is important, should not be understated, which is 4 years, almost 4 years post-pandemic, with a significant disruption, a record 4.5 or 5.5 on average growth is fairly decent. And if you tie in the fact that the policies currently being pursued by the administration are trying to sort of tee us up for the next stage of our progress, you then will agree that that's important to note from a point of positivity. And it's difficult to do that given the current conversation. The final point that I think is important, as I sort of set the context for both the keynote address and David's remarks, is that yes, there are obvious difficulties that have to be confronted. A lot of them are stemming from business cycle adjustments, as I said, on the fiscal side and monetary policy side. And then it's left us with probably 4 key variables that you need to pay attention to. You have the FX sort of concerns on the one hand, but on the back of that, actually underlying that is actually a fiscal sort of realignment, if you will, especially in view of the June 2024 Eurobond maturity. And I think David has repeatedly engaged the public, as he should, on this matter. So yes, we are cautiously optimistic about both this year, but more importantly, 2024. And we do think that the conversation before us today will help us bridge the gap between that sort of lived reality, which is the cost of living crisis that's being sort of addressed, and then, of course, the headline as well. So I'll stop there and ask John to come back and continue with the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Rafa. You made it very, very quick. Did I say that much? But thank you. So our next speaker will delve a bit in some of the things that we have said, and I'm sure answer some of your key questions. So as you come up, the next speaker, one of the questions I'll pose to you is exactly what I said. Why does Wall Street feel so different from Main Street? Why does Upper Hill feel so different from the States? Dr. David D. is currently serving as the chair of the Presidential Council of Economic Advisors. Dr. D. is an economist, author, public intellectual, and well-known columnist covering economic development and governance issues. Previously, he served as the chief strategist of the National Super Alliance. He has also had a long career in civil society, going back to when he co-founded the Institute of Economic Affairs at just 26 years old in 1994. The Institute became Kenya's first independent policy think tank. A renowned scholar and an astute researcher, Dr. Ndi, also an Eisenhower Fellow, has written vastly and has been cited numerous times by fellow scholars. He's a Rhodes Scholar on top of being an Eisenhower Fellow, with a PhD and a master's degree in economics from the University of Oxford, and another master's degree from the University of Nairobi, where he also pursued his undergraduate degree. He is also a very active member of Twitter. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Dr. David D.
Dear. Good morning. Very well. Good morning, Mr. Muriuki. Hi. It's a good friend I haven't seen for a long time. Let me start with an anecdote. Many years ago, a business I was advising, one of the prominent businesses and very successful business in the country. I think it was post-1997 election. And I went to one of those sessions, which some of you have been, where you're looking at strategy and external environment and macro issues. And these people, this business, they had very aggressive numbers. We had just come out of an election. There had been a bit of violence. It was Moi's last term. If you recall, there was then big conversation about whether Moi would retire or whether he might seek a third term, as many of his colleagues were doing. The fundamentals, the previous sort of 5-6 years had fairly good trajectory, and therefore people wanted to be optimistic. So we had a conversation And I managed to persuade them, the leadership, that they needed to hunker down and have a more sort of conservative scenario. Things actually went south for a considerable period. People remember 97 to 2002 was actually one of the most difficult times. And every time we met thereafter, the CEO, who has since retired, kept reminding people that that decision is what saved the business. Many of their colleagues did not survive. So bad news is not always bad news. If you need to plan based on the best possible, and actually very often what you want is to survive difficult times, not necessarily to thrive in good times. You can thrive in good times, that's easy. Surviving difficult times is a much more, and you need to have the mindset to do that. So you can tell I'm prefacing, so I'm very tough. I have 3 slides that I will speak to, just to foreground a few more comments about where we are, why we're there. It's very important, and how perhaps things might unfold. The first slide on the left has our budget balance, and the next slide has the current account balance, 2 very critical. No, don't go back, stay there for a while. Very critical. I'm going to stay there for a little while. And it goes back, you can see the current account, the budget balance goes back to about 2003. It's very important always to follow long-term trends. The other one goes up from 2000 to now, 2022. And the budget balance projects forward up to about 2027. The blue bar, they're not as visible there, is the overall deficit. The green bar is the primary surplus, which is your budget balance excluding interest payments. And what you can see, if you look at the shape of those 2 things, is that they are probably the same thing. Yeah, you see the same trajectory. You start with in the early Kibaki years, you've got small macro imbalances and some positive balances. And then we go into this episode over the last decade of very, very large imbalances. Now, what is driving what? Of course, the thing which is driving the current account is the budget deficit. What's going on? Going on is the thing that I have talked about for the last one decade, which is debt-financed public infrastructure investment-led growth. That, of course, what you see is reflected in the current account. I think, again, back to some national accounting, which sometimes people don't appreciate, is that when you go to China and you borrow money, you actually don't borrow money. If you're building a railway, what you are borrowing is actually capital goods. Yeah? You don't manufacture your own capital goods. So what you're really looking for is foreign exchange to finance the imports of capital goods, steel, rail, all sorts of things, locomotives. So obviously that will appear in your imports, therefore you're expanding the current account. It will appear as a big sort of trade deficit, and on the financing account, it will appear as an inflow of capital. It actually, no capital comes in, it's actually only steel, cement, and all sorts of things, but from an accounting perspective, we put that as capital inputs. So you build the railway. But no money came in. You know, you went to a supermarket in China and filled your trolley, yeah, swiped your debit card, came back, put all your sort of stuff, and then you're told you can pay later. Yeah, so when time comes to pay, how do you pay? You actually now have to pay from your salary. So as you are enjoying your flat screen TV and all manner of things, you don't remember at some point, the grace period is going to expire. And then one day you look at your pay slip and wow, you know, a third of it is missing. Yeah. So that's what happens. But also, because you're doing that so heavily, you now have to also look, how do you finance your other imports? So not only do you borrow from to those capital goods, you actually go to the markets because you have access to the markets, and you also borrow from the markets now, similarly to finance. So all that is driving a very huge budget deficit, 8% per year for a couple of years. And then, of course, that is reflected in your current account. So what you see is that not only are you, soon the interest payments start catching up with you. So I think in 2014, when the Jubilee administration came in, interest payments were about 12% of revenue. I think now the number is about something like 28 to 30%, one third, close to approaching a third. Of course, you assume when you go to the market in particular that you will always be able to refinance your debt. But markets are fickle, yeah, and times change. At the time, I think when you had all this cheap money that you were able to go and borrow because of QE, bond salesmen were everywhere. They were telling you, we went to the market with the first Euro bond that is now maturing. We said we wanted to do a debut issue of $500 million for benchmarking so that we can diversify our sources. By the time we were done the issue, we had borrowed $2.8 billion. First, we borrowed $2.2 billion, and then the market told us, hey, the bond is still oversubscribed. We were to learn a while later that we left the tap open and tapped another $800 million, so $2.8 billion. I won't go into the other stories. But there you are. At some point, by the time you are coming to repay, which is about now, markets have changed. They've closed. So how to refinance, of course, is a very big part of the question. But something else has happened. China also, which was on this foray of trying to externalize its recession by exporting its capital goods. That's why they're sort of financing you to build railways and all sorts of construction things. China also runs into difficulties, both with the Belt and Road and also with its domestic financial system. So China stops lending. So all of a sudden, first China is lending Africa outflows of about $20 billion a year. I think last year it was $2 billion. In our case, we are having inflows of capital goods coming from China, all this infrastructure that is sustaining the economy, and then China stops, so you're not getting the economic activity, but you're also paying. So we move from net inflows of $1 billion from China to net outflows of $1 billion from one year to the next. So you got to flip. You can go to the market. And that's where you find yourself now. So that's the macro story of the situation that we find, and which we knew we were going to find ourselves at. We wrote about it in our manifesto, but that part is seldom read. Now, that's the macro story. Now, the real economy story, which is the question that John asked me, is in the next slide. Now, I've not been able to update this because it's a lot harder work, but we're working on it. But this story tells you how that is, what that is doing to the composition of output of GDP. So it's a 4-year moving average. So it's dragging 2012 includes all the way from 2008 for stability purposes. So the dot is your GDP growth rate, which is roughly around 6%, 65 point something percent, that's 5. So the growth rate isn't changing very much. Yeah, economy is growing at 5.5% over the entire period. But if you look at the composition, there are some bars at the bottom, which are dark blue, which are increasing. And that is government consumption and government investment, government. So between 2012 and 2017, in that first term of the Jubilee administration, when you have 6% growth, government is contributing 1.5 percentage points. So that would be about a quarter. By 2017, when you have 6% of something growth, government is consuming 2.5. So government share of growth has grown to 40%. And that's like 5-6 years ago. So if you look at it now, I suspect government contribution will be about half or thereabouts. So it's government that's driving. So the growth, the growth number up there is not changing. So, but only government. So what is government replacing? Government is crowding out production. Yeah. And government is crowding out production with debt financed aggregate demand, both domestic. Of course, it's borrowing domestically, so it's crowding out the private sector. It's borrowing abroad, and it's beginning to cause resource shift, very fundamental resource shifts. Those who are familiar with the economics of natural resources will be familiar with the phenomena called the Dutch disease, because most of what the government spends on goes into what you call non-tradable sector, like construction. So the only game in town is supplying government. If somebody has a truck and they were previously transporting farm produce, now they can transport construction material for government project at twice the price. So that price goes up. So the people in farm produce cannot afford. So produce is becoming more expensive. And of course, in the world market, you cannot push prices. So you're losing competitiveness. So the share of government in GDP is increasing vis-a-vis the productive sector. And of course, the productive sector also includes exports, because government doesn't produce exports. The other thing that does is that it is a production sector that pays taxes. So although GDP, the denominator is expanding, the share of the tax-paying part of GDP is falling, because government can't tax itself. And in fact, when you're talking about big public projects, like the big roads and the railway and all of those, the contractors are actually tax exempt because the financing is considered aid. Yeah. So then you will see that the tax share of GDP is falling because the economy is becoming very government-centric. And of course, that has distributional consequences. Up in Upper Hill, you are able to extract more interest from government. Yeah. People who are connected to government, entrepreneurs, having a field day. I'm driving down Kenyatta Avenue or Moi Avenue. All I can see is black SUVs, one after another. And I'm telling you, people, the day of reckoning is coming, but you're not listening. When you see that, you know what is coming. It's very, very familiar. That's a Dutch disease problem. Property prices are going up. That means that the shift between tradables and non-tradable pricing, your real exchange is appreciating or becoming less competitive. A time of reckoning is coming, but we are having a great party. So who's listening? Yeah. So that is there are huge distribution of consequences. Who's paying for these? People in the production sector. They're the ones who are paying for this. Because you've shifted resources. We are not supporting farmers because we are now, all this urban economy is booming. It's consuming, we are eating debt. We are reducing food production within a very short time. If you look at our numbers, our food imports actually triple. So that also is undermining your external balance quite significantly, because you're now importing quite a lot of your basic food. I think the last time I looked, that number had gone up to something like $3 billion a year of basic food imports. And of course, so that when you have global price shocks on food, okay, those are transmitted very directly to households. Yeah. Households who have not benefited from the construction boom. And in fact, the production economy has been undermined. So your farmers, your rural economy, your market has been taken away. But now you have to buy imported food. So where is the disconnect between Wall Street and Main Street? It's right there. It's in the distributional consequences of this phenomena. And of course, at some point, the music stops. Yeah, so when the music stops, all these things begin to unravel all at once. In the last slide, shows that this phenomena is not peculiar to Kenya. It's actually Africa-wide. This is a similar growth decomposition like the one I have shown, but this is done by the IMF using sort of a much different database. Penwall tables, people who do research will be familiar with it, which tries to correct for some of the problems that you're talking about national accounting. But again, it's a composition of expenditure. The thing you want to look at is this side is Africa, that side is other emerging and developing economies, and it's over a period of time. You see what's happening to Africa, 2000 to 2014, growth about 5%, but it's mostly coming from investment, physical capital. Same thing we have been talking about. Yeah, infrastructure building. Your growth is actually coming out of infrastructure building. There's a bit of productivity growth. I want us to focus on that orange bar, the productivity growth. You then have that kind of collapse. For a while, it goes up, but you see that now you can no longer financing. Countries are running into debt distress. You can no longer finance the infrastructure, so your growth comes down. You cannot sustain debt finance infrastructure, especially when that infrastructure probably has undermined the production sector, so you cannot even sweat your infrastructure because you have undermined production. If you look at other countries, what you see is that even though there is capex-led growth, it is also translating to the orange bar, which is what you want, which is productivity. So growth is more driven by productivity. Therefore, the infrastructure there, whatever they are putting in capex, is paying off in terms of productivity. In our case, you're putting in infrastructure in Africa, but you're not getting the dividend in terms of productivity. So there's something structurally about the way we are going about infrastructure. And I have a paper about that. If you look at it, look it up. It's published by the Carnegie Endowment, trying to explain why you observe that our infrastructure doesn't have the same impact on productivity as in other parts of the world. So people say that I'm long on theory and short on solutions. But if you don't know what is ailing you, you can't solve it. Why is this? What is happening? Why doesn't the government have solutions? So then you have to understand. So what are we trying to do and what it said? We say we have to rebalance the economy back to production. So we have to shift resources back to the productive economy. We have to slow down on infrastructure and sweat the infrastructure we have already built. Yeah. At any rate, we don't have the headroom, the fiscal headroom, to keep borrowing to finance the same growth model. That has to change. So even what you must do, there's some infrastructure, for example, if you're going to increase your production, this country is still predominantly agricultural. So you're going to have to put in infrastructure that supports agriculture, like irrigation. But even if you have to do that, you probably try as much as possible that you get that out of, you take that into the private off-balance sheet of the government balance sheet. And if you read our strategy, that's what it says. That infrastructure which we must do, we try and do as much of it off balance. And we've done that. We've actually come up with a structure for doing that for water and irrigation. If you go to water website, you will see a pipeline of about 30 projects that we have put out for PPP using the water purchasing agreement instrument we have developed, very much similar to the one we use in the power sector. We are trying to do similar things with ports, airports, the infrastructure that you must have to support your economy. What we cannot do more of is more expressways. That we don't need more of. So, while you are doing this, there will be distribution of consequences. And there are adjustment costs and sometimes coordination failures. Because as you get out of the construction, public infrastructure economy, and you try and get back into the production economy, then there will be a withdrawal symptom. And that's what you're hearing. You're hearing a huge withdrawal symptom because the production economy hasn't quite picked up, but fiscally you cannot afford to continue feeding this beast. Because that takes you over the cliff. That's what our good friends in Ghana did. New government got, or in Sri Lanka as well. New government gets elected, but it doesn't have the will or doesn't to bite the bullet because you want to remain popular. You insist on implementing your promises, and of course, most electoral promises are linked to public spending. So you start implementing your electoral process. And in fact, the Ghana government went further and said, we need to create an enabling environment for business. So they reduce taxes and increase expenditure. And you already have a debt problem and a fiscal problem. Where do you think you're going to end up? Yeah? You're going to end up where they have ended up. So the imperatives are quite clear, but there are transitional costs. We believe that what you're doing is working. To just give you an illustration, the first thing we had to do absolutely was to deal with the food crisis. And of course, in Kenya, food is almost synonymous with maize. At 200 shillings a packet, that in itself has other social consequences. So we said we're going to take money out of petroleum subsidies, which we should not have been doing in the first place, to finance subsidies for those SUVs I talked about, and put it in fertilizer. In fact, the amount we put in fertilizer is what we were spending on oil subsidies for 1 month, about 6-7 billion shillings. The return on that, 2 seasons, 15 million extra bags of maize. We've actually managed to get the yield up, if the numbers I'm getting are correct, from 8 to 12 bags an acre. Also got some increase in acreage. That's the biggest single year increase, I think, in maize yield increase we've had in our history, if I'm not wrong. But we have to validate the numbers. I think it's probably a bit more than I expected, but you never know. So those things, that's obviously fairly low-hanging fruit. I can go into details of if you look at our budget and the way we are operationalizing plan, we have 10 high priority agricultural value chains that we think are what we need to do that realignment. Why are we focusing on agriculture besides food? Is because agriculture doesn't need new investment. We have the farmers, they have the livestock, they know how to do it. All they need is actually working capital. So there's a fairly huge runway that you can get yourself back into the production economy. But of course, in the meantime, you still have to see how you also expand your revenue base. Because if you don't expand your revenue base, that fiscal thing will keep bothering you for a long time. So I think that's the gist of what we are trying to do. I hope it explains some of the things that sometimes may seem inexplicable. But we believe it's working. We can see some green shoots here and there if you pay attention particularly to the agricultural sector. But also the fact that people are feeling the pain means that the adjustment is happening. Thank you very much.
Expect me to say something funny, don't you? Are you feeling the pain? Are you feeling the pain? Yeah, that's what we're being asked. Are you feeling the pain? So I think I think you've answered my question extremely well. Extremely well. The question I'd asked, if you remember, why does the state feel different from Upper Hill? Or why does Upper Hill, the financial district, feel so different from the estates? And I think I listen and I summarized one problem. Yeah, David D, what you're saying. The problem we have in this country is called Serikali's idea. It's called what? Serikali's idea. All of us are asking for Serikali to come build roads. We're all asking for Serikali to come and build railways, isn't it? We're all asking for Serikali to give us contracts. Yeah? So Serikali's idea is a problem. That's what he has told us, that government spending, not just revenue collection, but government spending has crowded out the private sector. We have all built businesses. Today we are building businesses to supply to government. I think that's what he said. We are all building business to supply to government. And it's true. You see Juakalis out there saying, government, please come by stools from me, come by tables from me, because I'm building these wonderful tables for your offices. Serikali's idea. Day of reckoning is coming, he told us. It's a great party, so nobody is willing to stop it. That's what David D has told us. I think the summary again, Serikali's idea, we are a debt economy, or as we say in banking, we have become the LPO economy, isn't it? Everybody comes with a government LPO to be funded. Isn't that true, Mr. Mondi? You have a government LPO, you have to fund me. So we've become a debt-filled government LPO economy. We have to take the tough decisions which have rebalanced the economy back to productive economy, slow capital formation to adjust to productivity. And as we do so, there will be distributional consequences. And the consequences are being felt in the estates today. So thank you, Dr. D, for that. And so can you join me giving him the NCBA clap? So let's go 1, 2, and one more time. And one last time. So thank you very much, Dr. D. He'll be back here for Q&A for those of you who have lots of questions. Now, our next speaker, I have to be very careful because she's also my boss. Is my boss. She's one of the best bankers you'll ever meet, one of the smartest people that Kenya has had. Wonderful to have her today. Dr. Susan Koech is the Deputy Governor of the Central Bank of Kenya. She's a career banker who switched lanes and took on various public roles, serving as Principal Secretary in the State Departments for Wildlife, East African Community, and Regional Development. Dr. Susan Koech possesses extensive experience in the conduct of public service and corporate experience. During her tenure as a Principal Secretary, Dr. Koech is credited with establishing and negotiating for trade and investment country positions at the regional level and strengthening bilateral relations and engagements across the East African community. Moreover, she was instrumental in accelerating the progress on the establishment of the East African Monetary Union as a way of strengthening intra-EAC trade and investments. At the State Department for Wildlife, she developed innovative, sustainable models to achieve best practices in wildlife conservation. Before taking on public office, she was a banker. That's her only scene in her career. She was a banker working as head of the Nairobi region of the Kenya Commercial Bank. She holds a doctorate in business management and a master's degree in business administration from Moi University, where she also pursued an undergraduate degree. Dr. Koech takes on the job of being a central banker at a time when we all know this is the hardest job to have in the world today. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Susan Koech.
The Group CEO of NCBA Bank, the Chairperson Economic Council, the invited panelists this morning. Invited guests who include my sister Esther Koimet. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Good morning once again. I think it's a difficult task speaking after Professor Ndi. but I'll be able to give you the central bank perspective. IKC gave you his perspective and also the perspective from the Economic Council. I'm deeply honored to be invited to participate in this very important and timely NCBA Economic Forum. I also greatly appreciate the relevance of the theme on which I've been requested to speak, the 2024 macroeconomic outlook, divergences across economies and sectors. This theme is topical not only for us in Kenya, but also the whole world, ranging from the sub-Saharan Africa region to the Middle East, Europe, as well as Latin America. As you are aware, the global economy has witnessed multiple shocks in the recent past, including the COVID-19 pandemic, adverse effects of climate change on agricultural production, high inflation, and escalation of geopolitical tensions, particularly the war in Ukraine and the current happenings in the Middle East. Indeed, the spillover effects of these shocks have been felt in most economies, including Kenya. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to provide some highlights of the recent global and domestic economic developments and the outlook from the central bank perspective. As you may be aware, a weaker global growth is expected in 2023 and 2024 compared to the outcomes of 2022. The IMF World Economic Outlook released in October 2023 shows that global growth is expected to decelerate from 3.5% in 2022 to 3.0% in 2023 and 2.9% in 2024, with significant divergences across major economies. This outlook largely reflects reduced economic activity in advanced economies, particularly in the euro area and China, amid increased uncertainty regarding persistent inflationary pressures, increased borrowing costs following monetary policy tightening, and continuing geopolitical tensions. Growth in China has slowed down due to prolonged weaknesses in the property sector. Growth in sub-Saharan Africa is projected to decline from 4.0% in 2022 to 3.3% in 2023 on account of elevated inflationary pressures and rising borrowing costs, before picking up to 4.0% in 2024. While the general softening of performance is uniform across the globe, with a few exceptions like Kenya, there are different unique factors undermining performance in individual economies. For example, growth in Nigeria is projected to decline due to security issues in the oil sector, while growth in South Africa is expected to decline in 2023 due to the effects of power shortages. Despite the global uncertainties, Kenya's growth has remained strong and is expected to remain above the global and sub-Saharan Africa averages in 2023 and 2024, pointing to the resilience and diversified nature of the economy. The economy grew by 4.8% in 2022, well above the sub-Saharan region average growth of 4.0% and the global average of 3.5%. The CBK expects the economy to grow by 5.5%. Please note that number. And don't take the number that John gave you earlier. That was from NCBA. We expect the economy to grow by 5.5% in 2023 and close to 6.0% in 2024, supported by a rebound in agriculture sector, resilience of the services sector, and impact of government measures aimed at stimulating growth in priority sectors of the economy, including in agriculture and manufacturing sectors. The main resilience of the Kenyan economy comes from the following. One, the economy is well diversified away from the traditional agriculture sector, which accounts for about 22% of annual GDP, with the service sector and MSMEs playing an increasing role, demonstrating the presence of a dynamic private sector. This has enabled the economy to weather the multiple shocks faced, particularly in recent years. B, Kenyan exports are well diversified in terms of products and destination, with Africa remaining the main export destination for about 40% of the exports. The implementation of Africa Continental Free Trade Area is expected to spur increased intra-African trade and therefore enhance demand for exports of Kenyan products. C, the policy measures currently being pursued by the government in aim to continue providing a strong foundation for macroeconomic stability and long-term growth. Coordination between monetary and fiscal policies continues to support stability in the economy and financial markets. The monetary policy stance continue to focus on achieving and maintaining price stability, and the government is committed to fiscal consolidation over the medium term to stabilize public debt. The lower domestic financing needs of the government will enable the expanded lending to the private sector by the banking sector. On the inflation front, emerging and frontier markets like Kenya have faced sustained inflationary pressures and elevated global risks. The CBK has tightened monetary policy by raising the central bank rate cumulatively by 350 basis points since May 2022 to 10.50%. Although inflation was largely driven by supply-side factors, the CBK actions aimed at mitigating the second-round effect and ensuring inflation expectations are well anchored. Overall inflation has since declined from a peak of 9.6% in October 2022 to 6.9% in October 2023, which is within our target range. The decline reflects the impact of monetary policy measures adopted by CBK, easing food prices attributed to favorable weather conditions, and the government measures to zero rate key food imports and enhance food production through subsidy on fertilizer prices. Food inflation is to 7.8% in October 2023 from a peak of 15.8% in October 2022. Fuel inflation remained elevated at 14.8% in October 2023 due to recent increases in global oil prices and removal of unsustainable subsidies. Cooking gas prices have been declining since July 2023 following the zero rating of VAT on the commodity. Non-food, non-fuel inflation has also declined from the peak of 4.4% in February 2023 to 3.6% as a result of the impact of monetary policy measures. We expect inflation to remain within the target range going forward, as we also remain vigilant of the impact of higher fuel prices due to volatility in the international oil prices space. Turning to the external sector, the current account deficit has narrowed and was estimated at 3.8% of GDP in the 12 months to September 2023. It is projected at 4.1% of GDP as at end of 2023, mainly supported by resilient diaspora remittance and lower imports. Export of goods declined 2.0% in the 12 months to September 2023, reflecting declines in receipts from horticulture, animal and vegetable oils, and miscellaneous manufactures. However, receipts from exports of tea, manufactured goods, and chemicals increased in the period. Imports of goods declined by 13.2% in the 12 months to September 2023, from a growth of 16.4% in a similar period in 2022, mainly reflecting lower imports of infrastructure-related equipment due to completed projects, manufactured goods, and chemicals. Diaspora remittance have remained strong. The remittance totaled $4.142 billion in the 12 months to September 2023, and were 3.5% higher compared to a similar period in 2022. Tourist receipts remain resilient and continue to support services balance. Tourist arrivals improved by 3.4% in the 8 months to August 2023, and were 3.3% higher compared to a similar period in 2022. This was largely because of the government efforts in ensuring that we have more conferences. The African Climate Summit, for instance, led to more dignitaries coming in. We've also seen a lot of head of states and head of governments coming to our country, and whenever they come, they will always will come with other dignitaries. In addition, the government has been able to open more airspaces, and this has actually led to improved tourists coming into our country. The use of foreign exchange reserve have remained adequate. On the banking sector, I would like to acknowledge the important role that banks have continued to play in the Kenyan economy, particularly in mobilizing savings and undertaking financial intermediation. Indeed, there is a scope for banks to play an even bigger role to achieve the country's development aspirations and better living standards for the population, and more so in the areas of financial inclusion. I would particularly like to take the opportunity to applaud the banks that have been supporting the MSMEs, as these are the vehicles for future growth and employment in the economy. We have also seen that our Kenyan local banks have continued to expand into the region, and that just shows that we indeed are the financial hub, and our financial sector has remained solid and it has remained stable. And indeed, on the issues of return on assets, our Kenyan banks always rate higher than the sub-Saharan African peers. I'm happy to report that the banking sector remains stable and resilient. The sector's capital adequacy ratio was 18.6%, while the liquidity ratio stood at 49.3% in September 2023, which were above the statutory limits of 14.5% and 20.0% respectively. The ratio of gross non-performing loans to gross loans stood at 15.0% in September 2023 compared to 13.7% in September 2022. However, the banks have continued to make adequate provisions for the non-performing loans. Growth in private sector credit stood at 12.2% in September 2023 and 12.6% in August 2023. Strong credit growth was observed in manufacturing sector, that is 22.0%, transport and communication sector, 18.5%, trade, 7.1%, and consumer durables, 10.5%. We expect growth in private sector credit to remain resilient with the continued rollout of innovative credit products targeted at micro, small, and medium enterprises. Regarding the fiscal side, the implementation of the financial year 23-24 government budget continues to reinforce the fiscal consolidation objectives. The financial year 22-23 budget deficit declined to 5.6% of GDP from 6.2% of GDP in financial year 2021-2022. A narrower budget deficit of 5.4% of GDP is expected for financial year 2023-2024 and 3.6% of GDP in financial year 2025-2026, which demonstrates the government's commitment to fiscal consolidation and to address public debt vulnerabilities. The CBK will continue to work closely with stakeholders to implement reforms that will enhance efficiency in financial markets, strengthen the banking sector, and enhance access to finance. As you are aware, ladies and gentlemen, the CBK has recently rolled out various reforms and initiatives that include: one, a new monetary policy implementation